Good morning and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of April 9th, 2024. We'll begin this morning by taking attendance, and I'll ask our General Counsel, Mark Silberman, to call the roll.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland,
Here, sorry.
You confused me. I was about to say I do.
Multitasking here.
Commissioner Chapin, Commissioner Chen,
Yeah.
Commissioner Chu,
Here.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson, Commissioner Lutfi.
Here.
Commissioner Master.
Here. All right, good morning again and welcome to the April 9th public hearing and public meeting. This meeting is being held in our public hearing room in person at 1 Center Street on the 9th floor. It's also being held via Zoom for any participants people who would like to participate remotely, and live stream on our YouTube channel if anyone would just like to watch the proceedings. And we're going to begin this morning with a public hearing for a item proposed for designation by the Research Department. And then we will move to our Preservation Department public meeting agenda, where we will be asked to calendar a set of rules, and we will review an application that has already had a public hearing and is returned today with a revised proposal. And then we will move to our Preservation Department public hearing agenda to review new applications for work on designated properties. And so with that, I will turn it over to Kate Lemos-McHale, our Director of Research.
Thank you, Sarah. Item number 1 this morning is LP 2678, the Heckscher Building, now the Crown Building, at 730 Fifth Avenue, aka 728 to 734 Fifth Avenue, 2 to 4 West 57th Street, Manhattan, Block 1272, Lot 7503, previously 39. Item proposed for this public hearing is the proposed designation of an ornate French Renaissance-style skyscraper designed by Warren and Wetmore and built in 1920 to 22, and presenting is Matt Postal.
Good morning. Rising on the southwest corner of Fifth Avenue and 57th Street, the Heckscher Building, now called the Crown Building, at 730 Fifth Avenue is one of Fifth Avenue's most visible and striking skyscrapers. Topped by an ornate octagonal tower with a steep pyramidal roof, the Heckscher Building was designed by Warren and Wetmore. Subsequent skyscrapers by this prominent firm, all New York City landmarks, include the Aeolian Building at 691 Fifth Avenue, the Con Edison Tower on East 14th Street, and the New York Central Building at the foot of Park Avenue. The Heckscher Building was commissioned by the Anaheim Realty Corporation, a syndicate backed by August Heckscher, who the New York Tribune described as, quote, probably the largest individual holder of office buildings in the city, as well as builder George Backer and Charles D. Wetmore, a partner in the architectural firm of Warren and Wetmore. Construction began in 1920 and was completed in 1922. Designed in the French Renaissance style to complement the Chateau-esque Vanderbilt mansion, which originally stood directly across 57th Street, it was also one of the first skyscrapers to conform to the 1916 zoning resolution, which required that tall buildings reduce their mass as they rise. With multiple setbacks starting at the 13th floor, this glorified chateau, as it was described in the journal Architecture and Building, described how a leading Beaux-Arts firm interpreted the new law and its impact on the emerging Fifth Avenue shopping district. Faced with limestone and cream-colored terracotta, notable classical style features include spiraling columns, figurative sculptures, and rows of decorative spandrel panels. The pyramidal roof incorporates large dormer and bullseye windows on each side, as well as an elaborate multi-story chimney stack and a crown-like finish. Planned as stores, showrooms, and offices, in early photographs, the tiered Heckscher Building soared above its neighbors. It was one of the first tall commercial buildings in this section of Fifth Avenue, anticipating the redevelopment of the area in the 1920s. The New York Times called it a radical change, and the Real Estate Record and Guide commented that it would be, in many respects, the most beautiful business building which ever graced this prestigious thoroughfare. For several years, 6 rooms on the 12th floor were rented to the Museum of Modern Art, which held its inaugural exhibition here in November 1929, devoted to Cézanne, Gauguin, Seurat, and Van Gogh, as well as Modern Architecture International Exhibition, which introduced New Yorkers to such leading European architects as Le Corbusier and Mies van der Rohe, held in 1932. The Heckscher Building was renamed the Crown Building in 1983. At this time, many of the architectural features were gilded, and the facades were illuminated at night. Converted to a hotel and residences in 2022, it remains a notable landmark, dominating the intersection of Fifth Avenue and 57th Street. The Heckscher Building is located on the southwest corner of Fifth Avenue and 57th Street. The tax lot incorporates an annex on West 56th Street, which is seen in the photograph at left, which is not being considered as part of the proposed designation. Completed in 1922, the Heckscher Building, now called the Crown Building, is a significant early skyscraper designed by Warren and Wetmore and an important part of the Midtown Manhattan skyline. The research department recommends its designation as an individual landmark.
Thank you, Matt. Commissioners, do we have any questions before we move to public testimony? Okay, we'll move to public testimony. We have one person who signed up, Paul Madden. Just please you can come right to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Madden, AVP of Brookfield Properties Retail Development. That's the group inside of Brookfield Properties that have been overseeing the redevelopment of retail condo for almost a decade. This process is formalizing something. This ownership group did for quite some time. This is, in fact, a landmark property. So I am here on behalf of Brookfield to testify in our support for the designation, with a caveat and expectation built on a successful relationship in the past with Landmark Preservation Commission and our successful staff, and our commitment to our stewardship of the other landmark properties we own in New York City. And our expectation is we'll be able to work through a master plan for the retail portion of the building that will, one, protect the historic fabric of the 735th Avenue, the Crown Building, the Heckscher Building, but also set our current and future tenants up with a suitable guideline that allow them to put their best brands forward and allow this property to be what is more contemporary history, a first-in-class retail property.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Okay, not seeing anyone else, I'm going to turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We had a few signups for this item. So the first we'll be hearing from is Andrea Goldwyn from the New York Landmarks Conservancy. Andrea Goldwyn, I am promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. I'm Andrea Goldwyn, speaking on behalf of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. The Conservancy supports designation of the Heckscher Building, now Crown Building, as an individual landmark. In this building, architects Warren and Wetmore translated their mastery of classical revival styles into a richly ornamented French Renaissance tower that follows the 1916 zoning resolution setback requirements. The 1922 tower rises from Fifth Avenue and 57th Street in a series of limestone bands and decorated spandrel panels, terminating in that ornate crown finial. The Crown Building also marks several points in Midtown history, signaling the shift away from residential use and toward commercial buildings or large commercial buildings along this section of Fifth Avenue, and it holds a unique place as an early home of the Museum of Modern Art. Anchoring a significant intersection with its eye-catching crown, many people probably consider the Crown Building a local landmark and might assume that it already has the recognition. It was deemed eligible for listing on the National Register in 1997, based on the Commission's 1979 Midtown West Survey. It was featured in the Conservancy's 1986 Midtown Survey of Buildings that should be designated, compiled by Andrew Dalkart, and we submitted an RFE in 2015. We are so pleased that the Commission is looking toward making it official. Thank you for the opportunity to express the Conservancy's views.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. As the citywide advocate for New York's architectural, historical, and cultural neighborhoods, the Historic Districts Council supports the designation of the Heckscher Building, now the Crown Building at 730 Fifth Avenue, as an individual landmark. Built between 1920 and 1922 by Warren and Wetmore for the developer and philanthropist August Heckscher, 730 Fifth Avenue was one of the first buildings whose design was influenced by the stipulations of the 1916 zoning code, which mandated the setbacks that led to New York's iconic Art Deco skyscrapers. As such, the Heckscher Building represents an important link in the architectural evolution of New York City and in the history of skyscraper design. Built on the site of the Stevens Whitney Mansion, the Heckscher Building also represents the architectural evolution of grandeur in New York City. At the end of the 19th century saw the proliferation of grand chateaus across 57th Street. The Stevens Whitney Mansion was completed at 2 West 57th Street in 1876, and the Cornelius Vanderbilt II Mansion rose across the street at 1 West 57th Street in 1883. Though the Vanderbilt Mansion was and remains the largest single-family home ever built in New York City, when the Heckscher Building was completed in 1922, it dwarfed the mansion in terms of height and heralded the skyscraper form as both the modern incarnation of urban life and the modern incarnation of wealth, anticipating the vertiginous heights now reached on 57th Street by the super talls of Billionaires Row. Indeed, the Heckscher Building was so indicative of a new epoch that the Museum of Modern Art, founded in 1929, found its first home on the 12th floor of the Heckscher Building. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I am looking through the attendees list now. I do not see any further hands raised. If you would like to speak on this item, please click the raise hand button now. Okay, no hands are raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 5 also recommends approval. And with that, I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Great, thank you very much. All right, Commissioners, any final questions before we close the hearing? All right, so I do want to thank the owners for both Brookfield and the owners of the upper floors for their continued conversations and cooperation as we've talked through the years about this process, but more importantly, for your incredible stewardship of the building, which is really why we're here today. We have this incredible property to consider. So thank you for your support and thank you for your stewardship. And should we move ahead with the designation, I'm sure we'll have a very cooperative working relationship as we work through your retail needs. So with that, let's make a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Chen, would you make the motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Ginsburg. Would you second that? motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we will come back for a public meeting for a vote in the near future. Thank you. All right, we'll move to the Preservation Department public meeting agenda and we'll turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation.
Thank you, Sarah. We're going to start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting item number 1. This is a proposal to initiate rulemaking pursuant to the City Administrative Procedures Act, including proposed amendments to Chapter 2 of Title 63 of the Rules of the City of New York, consisting of amendments to existing rules, including amendments relating to the installation of bus shelters.
Next slide, please. Next slide.
We're going to turn it over to Mark Silverman to start the presentation. Okay.
So commissioners, today you're going to be asked to calendar a proposed rule pursuant to the City Administrative Procedures Act and the rules concerning the placement of bus shelters in areas under the Landmark Commission's jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Bus shelters are part of a 2006 citywide franchise that included newsstands and public toilets that was established to create a unified aesthetic to be placed all around the city. The idea was that there would be bus shelters with seating for the first time. There'd be no cost to the taxpayers because the franchisee would be maintaining and installing these and would finance all that through advertising, limited advertising panels on the sides of these bus shelters, which you've all seen there throughout the city at this point. Next slide, please. The franchise agreement recognized historic paving as something that needed to be taken care of, so it required that the franchisee had to repair, replace, or restore any historic paving to its original condition after installation. Next slide, please. Historically, the LPC has had very limited jurisdiction because of this citywide franchise. There are the PDC, the Art Commission at the time. PDC now regulates the design. The design has been pretty much fixed since 2006. And bus stops are set by the MTA, and DOT is simply there to put bus shelters and other bus information there. Because of that, LPC historically didn't regulate these. The rule would address the fact that there are about 100 that have been installed in historic districts and other areas under our jurisdiction, as well as moving forward anything in the future. Next slide. This is the family. There's a family of bus shelters. They all have to deal with width and length and size to deal with sidewalk conditions. Next slide. The PDC recently approved the newest iteration of this, which is the narrowest version of the bus shelter. They're all the same, very, very transparent backs, information on the ends, and the double advertising panel on one side. Next slide. This just shows you how the new one will fit. It's a very, very slender bus shelter, and it can go on the narrowest of sidewalks. Next slide. These are some examples of ones that are already in historic districts. The one on the left is in Clinton Hill, and the one on the right, the Upper East Side. As you can see, they're very transparent. Next slide. So the proposed regulatory approach recognizes the LPC's very limited jurisdiction and discretion with respect to these. Again, the design is fixed and the locations are set there. They are bus stops. They cannot be moved. They cannot be moved across the street or down the street. This is where the bus stops are. And so if a approved design is being proposed to be put in an approved bus stop, no LPC permit would be required from the franchisee. It's a similar approach to the way we've did public pay telephones and the link kiosks. Next slide. The one exception would be historic paving. Notwithstanding the franchise language about historic paving, staff felt that we wanted eyes on these installations. As you can see here, the installation requires the lifting up of paving and these footings, and the proposed rule would require an LPC permit to put it into paving, and it may require, and with the goal of preserving historic paving to the greatest extent possible, but you could require some patching. And importantly, the rule also would require that if in the future the bus shelter is no longer needed because the bus stop has moved, or for whatever reason the DOT orders the bus stop removed, that the historic condition of the paving at the time of installation must be returned. So if there were big slabs of bluestone or other paving, they would have to be put back notwithstanding some modification to handle the installation. Next slide, please. It's a very straightforward and simple rule, commissioners. Staff is requesting and supporting a vote to calendar the rule. If that vote happens, we would start the CAPA process, which would involve publication in the city record, and then a public hearing in the next 30 days after, no sooner than 30 days from the publication date. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right, any questions? Yes, Vice Chair Bland.
Mark, is it any paving or historic paving?
Historic paving, so as we defined it in our rules. So bluestone, granite, brick, any historic
But
paving.
if it's just concrete,
Concrete, then they can go in without coming to the LPC.
And Commissioner Chu?
There's a question that I had earlier, which is the signs, the old signs that are still there. Is that something that they have a program to remove and replace by the graphics on the station?
Right. So the question has to do with this image, Commissioner. If you look past the installation and you'll see the tall pole with the bus routes on it. And as you may be familiar with those crossing take buses, that they're now putting digital boxes on those to indicate when the buses are coming. I did reach out to DOT, so the current current bus shelters do not include that kind of what they call real-time information. There is some discussion about that, but the DOT will be part of the public hearing presentation, so they will be here to answer any questions that you may have at that time.
All right, other questions? All right, then, well, I think this is something that we haven't historically regulated, as Mark explained, but that's something that we think we should, and that particularly where there's historic paving. So we do want to propose and codify a rule to enable us to do that. So as Mark said, if we vote to calendar, this will have a hearing no more after 30 days, and we'll hear from DOT as well at that time. So if there are no other questions, I would urge that we vote to calendar. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to make a motion to calendar?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so this item is calendared, and we will post the public hearing date and advertise it in City Record. All right, and we'll now move to the next public meeting item.
The next public meeting item is item number 2, LPC 24-08494, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 2367, Lot 38, 17 Fillmore Place in the Fillmore Place Historic District. This is an Italianate-style row house built circa 1853. And the application is to amend an approval under LPC 24-03097, construct a rear yard addition. The staff will be going through the slides after we open the proceedings.
Okay, so Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, proceedings are open.
Good morning, Commissioners. Elizabeth Fagan, Preservation Staff. 17 Fillmore Place was previously shown at the public hearing of January 9th, 2024, where the applicants proposed a full height rear yard addition. At that time, the application was approved with modifications to reduce the addition by 1 floor and retaining the top floor rear openings. And the applicants are returning with a revised proposal that includes a shorter addition and going deeper into the rear yard. Here are some context images showing the streetscape of the district and the existing rear yard conditions. To note, only a portion of this block is located within the Fillmore Place Historic District. Here's an image of the existing 2-story brick rear yard addition, which was constructed pursuant to a previous commission level approval. On the far right of the screen, you'll see the full height addition as previously shown in January. As mentioned at the public hearing in January, the proposal was approved with modifications to reduce the addition by one floor and to retain the existing masonry openings at the top floor. And on the second image from the right, you'll see the applicant's revised proposal, which reduces the addition by a floor and retains those top floor openings. And the new design also adds additional depth, which I will show in the following slides. Here's the existing building section and the proposed section in the center. At the upper right, you'll see the previously proposed section. Commissioners should note that the applicant is proposing to push out the depth of the addition by approximately 4.5 feet at the basement floor and 3.5 feet at the upper floors to match the depth of the adjacent neighbor at number 19 Fillmore Place. The previous version shown in January, the addition was maintaining the depth of the current rear yard addition and not extending beyond this. So in plan, you'll see that the proposed addition now aligns with the adjacent building at 19, which is at the bottom of the screen. And the parlor floor will also feature a roof deck that is angled with glass railings and extends slightly beyond the neighbor. Here's the proposed elevation. In the rendering, you'll see the changes more clearly, showing the addition now lowered by a floor and pushed out to match the neighbor's depth. Noting that the additional depth is why the commissioners are reviewing this today. The addition features the same stucco cladding and contemporary style and fenestration as last presented that the commissioners were supportive of. Just some context photos of the rear yard, noting that there are fences between the lots that provide separation between the additions, as well as the rear yard and addition is not visible from any public thoroughfares. So the applicants are here to answer any questions.
All right. So do we have any questions on this one? All right, I don't think so. All right, and maybe, yeah, that's a good one to land on. And what this rendering doesn't show are the fences, which are tall, solid fences on either side of the rear yard, separating this property from the adjacent properties and largely concealing the extra depth at the basement level. So we approved the previous scheme, but a floor shorter. And so this is an amendment to ask that with that reduction, could they also extend to align with the neighbor, which is also a commission-approved addition, correct? Okay. All right, so we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Chu, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think that with the removal of the top floor.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Yep,
think
he's
this is
on.
appropriate as proposed.
Okay, Commissioner Master?
Yes, I agree with Commissioner Chu, and I would also note that I think this block has a lot of variety in the building types and styles, so I think it's appropriate.
All right, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate in the context and, you know, the only issue that was raised, I think the last time really was the preserving sense of the top floors. So I think that's pretty good.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum? Okay, and we did already approve the design.
Right.
So, Commissioner Ginsburg?
Appropriate.
Okay. Okay, everybody agree?
No.
No, okay.
I'm gonna take Commissioner Goldblum's tentative and put it over the line for me. It's just too bizarre. Unrelated to anything that I can understand about the context of this block, or I'm all for diversity. You know, we see the same thing again and again and again. So I like seeing something different, but I think this is just out of left field or outer space or something. So I will be a lone dissenter,
Okay,
perhaps.
all right. Commissioner Lutfi?
So I do think it's aggressive. I actually think it got more aggressive by pushing it out those 4 extra feet. I mean, if you look at the comparison between the two, the first a proposal and the second, even though it came down a story, it reads as so much heavier. And I feel like it's just a bit too much right now. So I personally would like to recommend that it goes back the 4 feet so that it can at least, if it needs to make this statement, make it in a slightly more understated way.
Okay. All right, and I understand your position, even though we approved the design before, you think the depth changes how that design will sit within this context. And I think that part of the reason we approved it previously was because it is such a varied context. As Commissioner Goldblum said, sort of a unique donut where not all of it is designated and there's a lot of variety in it. So for that reason, I can support this change, since we approved the design in the first instance. So I think we have enough to make a motion and vote on it. Commissioner Chu, would you make the motion?
Okay. In the case of LPC 24-08494, 17 Fillmore Place, in the Fillmore Place Historic District, an Italianate style row house built in circa 1853. Application is to amend an approval under LPC 24-03097 to construct a rear yard addition. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of Fillmore Place Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the existing rear addition and top floor of the rear facade have been recently rebuilt. Therefore, no significant architectural features will be altered by the construction of a rear addition, that the work will not be visible from any public thoroughfares, that only half the block is located within the historic district, and that the block features a variety of building types and sizes. Therefore, the presence of a sculptural contemporary rear yard addition is consistent with the varied buildings and additions within the block. That the use of neutral stucco facade with large punched window openings will be in keeping with other contemporary additions approved within this district. That the addition will not rise to the full height of the building and therefore will not overwhelm the scale of this row house. And that the masonry openings at the top floor of the rear facade will be retained. That the addition will not exceed or extend beyond the depth of the rear addition at 19 Fillmore Place, and that the projecting deck will be angled so that only a portion of the deck extends past the addition and therefore will not diminish the essential green space. That the work will not detract from any significant historic or architectural features of this building or the historic district.
Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland, Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved. Thanks. And we'll move to the public hearing agenda.
Okay, and I'm actually going to read in the first 6 items all together. They'll be presented together. They are separate properties under separate ownership. Some are continuous in a row. Others are pocket and separated a little bit more than that, but I'll try my best to group these in a way that makes sense. So items 1 through 3, these are all on block 307 in the borough of Brooklyn. And these are all applications for a certificate of appropriateness. They're row houses built in the early 1850s. And for each, the application is to reconstruct portions of the front facade. And specifically, it's item 1 is LPC 24-00926. That's 214 Court Street in the Cobble Hill Historic District, lot 28. Item 2, LPC 24-04539. That's 216 Court Street, lot 29. And item 3, LPC 24-04537, 218 Court Street, lot 30. Then there are 3 others. These are also on block 307 in the borough of Brooklyn. Also for certificate of appropriateness applications. These 3 are row houses with neo-Grec style elements built in the early 1850s. And these applications are also to reconstruct portions of the front facade. And specifically, item 4 is LPC 24-04553. That's 222 Court Street on lot 32. Item 5 is LPC 24-00269, 228 Court Street on lot 35. And finally, item 6, LPC 24-07619. That's 230 Court Street on lot 36. Staff, you may begin the presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Winnie Child, Preservation Staff. So this is a single presentation for the same work proposed at 214, 216, 218, 222, 228, and 230 Court Street. The proposal does not cover work at 212, 220, 224, or 226. So these buildings are all located on the west side of Court Street between Baltic and Warren Street in the Cobble Hill Historic District. The proposal before you today is for reconstructing portions of the front facade at these buildings where the elder wife of brick is pulling away from the backup brick. The row of seemingly identical buildings on this block was built in the early 1850s in 2 sections. Here you can see that 212 through 220 is a couple of inches shorter than 222 through 230, which is on your left. These buildings historically appear to have exposed brick facades, stone lintels and sills, wood neo-Grec style cornices carried on brackets, and multi-like double hung wood windows. So these are the tax photos of 214, 216, and 218. Here's the tax photos for 222, 228, and 230. These are the designation photos. So by the time of designation, 212 and 216, as you can see on the right, already had their cornices removed and replaced with simple 20th century style parapets. Most of the buildings have been stuccoed over, leaving only a couple, which is 222, 226, and 228 with their brickwork still exposed. Here are some current condition photos. So you see 214, 216, and 218. At 216, the parapet has been replaced with the cornice has been replaced with a parapet, and all these buildings have been stuccoed over. Here's 222, 228, and 230. So at 222 and 228, the brickwork is still exposed, and all of these still have their wood cornices, and they also have a brick apron beneath that. Also at 228, you can see that the lintels still have a profile. So they did do a couple of probes around some of these buildings. And here you can see that 214, where you can see that the some of the stucco was exposed and some of the mortar behind the brick width have already been deteriorated. Here's a couple additional probes at the other buildings. So the outer width of brick is currently separating from the backup masonry at all these buildings in question. And this is causing a hazardous and unsafe condition, and they were cited for this by DOB. I think John wants to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, Commissioners, if I can just give a little background on this, because it is unusual to have 6 applications come before you at once for virtually the same condition. What happened is that Winnie had one application for extensive facade work at 224 Court Street. She realized because of the condition of the building and consistent with our at-risk building initiative, she flagged it. So I became involved. I brought in Tim Lynch from DOB. We all made a site visit on a very cold January day with the owner's engineer to look at 224 Court Street. When we were on the site visit, of course, we're looking at the neighboring buildings to see their condition. And we realized, literally looking down the block, multiple buildings had the exact same facade condition. So DOB then followed up with their FEU engineers. They realized a total of 6 buildings on this block had the same condition. They issued a number of commissioners' orders from DOB to make repairs. We brought in Don Friedman. He also did a site visit. We met with DOB engineers and the owner's engineers, and in an abundance of caution and transparency, we thought it'd be best to bring these matters to you at a C of A hearing.
Sorry, Commissioner Goldblum.
You could see that the plane of the facades were pulling away. The windows were sort of recessed. There were cracks. There were a variety of indicators.
And what's the surmises to that cause?
I think it's the construction method. I'm not an engineer. So, Tim Lynch and the owner's engineer were very involved with that. I believe it was a construction method.
Yeah. If the applicant is here remotely, perhaps they can answer.
No, he's on the way here.
Okay, got it.
The engineer's on the way.
Sorry, Commissioner Chu.
Related to that question, is it the layer of plaster and cementitious facade is delaminating from the brick substrate, and they're getting these voids behind?
Yeah, there are voids, and maybe Winnie can answer that question a bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, so when we were on site with DOB, the inspector from DOB believed that the way these buildings were constructed, the brickwork is actually tied into the building at wood nailers, and those wood nailers have deteriorated over time. And so the brick had been slowly peeling away from the building, and their solution back in the 50s was to stucco everything over. So currently the stucco itself is actually becoming a structural element of these facades. And with the stucco in place, the mortar was not able to breathe and let water out through the facade. And so it's been stuck inside and slowly deteriorating the mortar joints inside. So as they slowly remove some of the stucco, it's possible that more damage might be caused by that removal because it's purely structural at this point.
Right. Thank you, Winnie. And I think the applicant has arrived. If you'd like to come up and state your name, come up to the mic and just state your name. We, I think, have some additional questions. Winnie's already outlined the proposal for us, so we're just beginning our questions.
Morning, everyone. So sorry again for this delay, but this is Handy Dimitri with Sotier Associates. We've been working on this project since late 2022, and because of it all got started with the forensic unit. Okay, it all got started with the DOB forensic unit. It's rooted at 224 Court Street, and then they reviewed the whole block and issued this emergency declaration to everyone on the block. Couple buildings are not requiring full replacement of the front white brick, but here we're working on 6 of them. 3 on the north side of the block, to 14, 16, and 18, and 3 on the southern side of the block, which is 20, 22, 28, and 30. The north side, they're all built together. From the studies, they're all like one pack of structure. 222 through 226, they're built together, and 228 and 230 are built together. They're exactly the same everything. So far, we're replacing the front white of the brick, as Winnie had explained. We're using mechanical ties. We're not using the header bricks. So it's all like running pattern for the bricks. Stone lintels and saddles, they will be kept in place unless we had to go to option B. So here we have an existing condition showing the stucco, option A in the middle, which is just replacing the front white brick. Option B would have a full replacement of the full front facade, depending on the status or condition of the back white of brick. From probes and examinations, several probes were taken all of these buildings. We should not get into this stage But just in case option, this will be replaced with the 6/1 pattern windows on the north side of the block based on the historic pictures. And for the southern side, which is 22, 28, and 30, they will be 2/1 windows. Stone lintels and sills, same pattern of brick. So the end product should be the same, except that there are any 1/1 windows. They're to be replaced with brown metal windows with 2/1 pattern. All the cornices are to remain in place. They will be tied back from the back of the parapet, just for this front point to be held back in place for these, whatever number of courses, 6 or 7 course bricks, and everything to roll it to be replaced. If the full facade to be replaced, it will be removed and restored back, or if they have to be replaced. Except for one building, it's 216 court. 216 court currently, and according to the designation picture, did not have a cornice at all. Historically, they did have one. So as for option A, that we're proposing, we don't have this facade on here, but we have it on the pictures. If we could go back to, I think, the third and fourth page, the designation pictures. Yeah, you know that? Yes, so on the designation picture, you can see 216 doesn't have any corners. Standing right in the middle. If you go backwards, 2 more pictures, 2 more slides back, 1 more, yes. 216 had a cornice with the historic pictures. So in case we had to move to option B, which is full replacement of the facade, we'll be restoring back that cornice at the top of the building. Pretty much, that's all. The rest of the slide are all pictures
From the investigations. All right, Commissioner Chen, followed by Commissioner Chapin.
So you said 222 and 224 and 226 are together? So what happened to those 2 buildings?
224 is currently getting the work done. They're already in action. 226, we're trying to get in. We got in touch with the owner of the building, and DOB had sent her few inspectors over because they have to take action. They still did not take action. So they might join the group as of today. I don't have any information on it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin, followed by Commissioner Goldblum.
Yeah, unfortunate that the earthquake didn't cause even more damage to these buildings. They look like they're in a very precarious state right now. So it's good that I think that the action is being taken as immediately as possible for most of them. I was wondering about whether, are they still occupied? Is there a concern about any potential for immediate collapse, or?
Some of the most of the buildings are occupied. It's commercial on the ground floor, and then residential upstairs. Some of the apartments are empty upstairs, but DOB has not issued any vacate orders, which they would do if they thought there was an immediate issue.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. Thank you.
And structurally, the main concern is for the front white wood brick to pull out of the building. It's not really bearing, just carrying its own weight for the most part.
Yeah.
Some of the structural details on here showing tiebacks from the front of the building through 3 or 4 joists back, just to pull it backwards, tied back to the building. So structurally, the building is sound.
Yep, Commissioner Chu.
Did they not use headers to join the 2 Ys together? Why are they?
They had hidden headers, so they're not through headers that
Right.
you could see from the front of the building.
Right.
They're tilted, so they catch at the edge, and they notch the brick to carry it. So with the years, this grout
Yeah.
got deteriorated and it's pulling out. And it's a case that DOB had issued a bulletin for and a memo that went to pretty much all these types of buildings. They're tracking down on them. They have quite a few in there.
And were you, as 224 is under work now repaired, what are you finding you have to do, the option A or B?
It's not our option.
Oh, it's not your
It's,
project.
it's someone else's applicant. Yes, they're doing a mix of all, because the main issue was, that's from general knowledge from research, that they're replacing sections of the wall and they're replacing front and back sections of the wall and tying it with cement in between the cavities, the whole.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi.
I appreciate the fact that, well, that some of these buildings have different owners and that each feels that they need to do what they need to do, which may be somewhere in between the options, but on some level, these buildings are all connected and they're small buildings and their structural integrity is important overall, and the context that they are situated in is actually a very important commercial context within this neighborhood. I'm here all the time and am familiar with it. And I guess I just don't see and understand why everyone wouldn't move forward to do the best for the building for its future.
Another option B.
The full
Yeah.
reconstruction.
Yeah, the full reconstruction. I mean, it's going to not only affect the individual building, but it's going to have an impact on the whole strip. And for some of the owners to do the whole thing and others to put Band-Aids on just doesn't make sense to me. And so I'd like to get an understanding, if that's possible, as to why the owners, we're looking at this collectively, and why aren't the owners doing the same thing and thinking about, these are investments in their own properties and in the community as a whole, which they all are earning an income off of and providing a service. So if you could address that, I'd appreciate it.
So, going back to the process, how it started and how we got to this point. First of all, the DOB approached all these buildings to examine them, issue a structural report for the condition of the front walls and the structure in general, and at the same time issue or put the recommendations how to fix the issue. They did not say what they exactly want. So we did the probes, we did the reports, one for each building. And we had proposed, or the structural engineer on the project had proposed to tie back the front white as it is today, standing, and patch back the stucco. They didn't accept it. And they insisted that they wanted back and forth. This took about 6 months until it's actually resolved. Early spring of 2023. They are going for full replacement of these buildings because one other building they accepted that it's in very safe condition and there's no gap in between the bricks and it doesn't need much work similar to these. The back white of brick was examined from inside and from the outside when we opened the probes that we just saw on some of these slides. And it's in very good condition, intact, and it does not require replacement. Option B was put in because probes are one thing, and when we expose the whole facade to put new bricks, it's a different thing. If the ground is in bad shape, if there's no bulging at least on the north side of the block, there's no bulging, there's no cracks, there's no visible deterioration at all. It's a condition that's happening. So in case it creates a problem in the next 5 or 10 years, they're replacing these facades. But in general, like 214, 16, 18, you don't have the full out condition that's happening or was happening on 224 and the two neighboring buildings, 222 and 226.
So they don't all have the same level of deterioration and condition.
To some extent, yes. And so they're not considering it, they're not putting a Band-Aid on it, by replacing this front white and tying back into the joists of the building, they're so comfortable with it, and at the same time, they will be inspecting it once the back white had been exposed. One of the conditions for them to confirm which route we need to pursue.
And I would say that normally, for when we look at deteriorated buildings, our first step is to see whether it can be just addressed in situ and not reconstruct the whole thing. And we have, in rare instances where buildings have had such severe deterioration or collapse, we have approved full reconstruction, but that's usually a last resort. Usually you try to preserve what's there and work with that. So I think that, that's the goal, but that they're prepared to reconstruct if they have to. And I guess the real question is, if the other buildings are not at that level of deterioration, how are all of these bricks going to be keyed into each other? Okay, and then Commissioner Goldblum and then Commissioner Chu. Okay. So I guess the question is, if some of them are going to be either the outer whites replaced or reconstructed and others aren't, are you going to be able to key them back into the neighboring buildings that are not being addressed?
Yes, the buildings that are keyed into each other, they will be keyed back into each other. So for instance, I have 228, that's part of our project, but 226, the adjacent building, it's not. There are, yes, they are, these two buildings, they are keyed bricks. So that brick would be removed and replaced in place to have the same exact look. And if 226 takes action, then the other half will be.
If buildings are all the same, or by chunks, and if you're working on selected buildings with DOB and you found indications of failure, would you expect that the neighboring buildings that aren't under the current proposal will sooner or later suffer the same fate?
So the missing building and our scope is 222. And 222 is getting tiebacks at every 16-inch.
I'm talking about buildings that aren't in your proposal, ones that are next door, that are down the road.
I believe the building department had examined them. I'm not sure how it will be addressed. Like 212 would be the first building on the floor.
As a structural engineer, do you believe that the buildings are built the same way?
Yeah.
And given that this large number have failed in this rather spectacular way, do you think it's prudent for the other buildings to not be addressed? Are they subject to possible failure as well? Would you expect it to be a problem?
The only missing building in the middle, no, it wouldn't be, because there's no gap from the probes that we had opened. The front wall is solid. There's no air gap in the middle. Right. These buildings have their air gap.
So regarding your buildings, there's no header courses that were just running by.
There are header courses, but they're hidden, yeah.
But from the facade perspective, your plan is to remove in Plan A, all goes well, scrape off the old bricks and then put on new bricks.
Yes.
Do we have? Are you going to be taking off the headers still, or keeping them?
The headers, the tilted headers. Oh, the window headers.
The masonry stuff that we see.
No, these are staying.
They're staying.
Yeah.
Good. And the cornices that can stay will stay, and those that can't be replicated or replaced.
Yeah.
Great. And do you have? Are there any examples of the finished brick, finished jointing that are available so you can copy?
So we have examples for the stucco ones. We only have the size, and that's on one of the slides. For the color of the brick, we're using the same brick that's on 228, which is this one.
You're going to be able to match that jointing and the face brick.
Yeah.
Now, this is not going to be a weak wall. It's going to be a fully grouted wall. Right?
It's a fully grouted wall. Yeah.
There's no weeps. There's no cavities. No nothing.
There are no weep holes. No.
Great.
There's nothing like that.
All right. Thank you.
Right.
And just to address the issue of the other buildings, DOB really has given a very hard look with multiple senior engineers on site looking at them. And if they felt there was any concern, believe me, they would not hesitate issuing orders for any other buildings.
All right, and Corey wants to add something.
Just wanted to clarify a couple points too. I think either Winnie or the engineer mentioned it, but again, the storefronts are not included at this in all, right? It's just the brickwork that is above that. So there's no replacement of storefronts, no new designs for storefronts. None of that is under review. And as was noted, the cornices will either be kept in place, or if they had to be removed to do the work, they'd be put back. And in the one case, if there was full reconstruction, they'd actually put one there. Put one back that's not there now. But I did just want to clarify one thing on the windows as well. And this is the scenario, so is it plan B or plan C? The third option, if full construction is required, the application proposes to put back windows as you see here, which are 6/1 or 2/1. And in some cases, those are shown in the tax photo, but the staff does not believe those are the original configurations, and instead believe that some in the row either had 6/6 and some in the other sort of grouping had 2/2. So you see the staff's talking points about this. That is what's being referred to here. The applicant referred to the 6/1 as the historic windows. They are historic, but we don't believe they're the original windows. So I just wanted to make that distinction specifically to the windows.
All right, thank you, Corey. Any other questions? All right, let's see if we have any public testimony. I'll note that there is no one in the hearing room, so I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a couple of hands raised in the Zoom attendees list. The first we'll be hearing from is Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society of New York. Christina Conroy, I've promoted you to panelist. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, there are a lot of pictures of probes in this presentation, but we find no information that would tell us why the radical interventions proposed are necessary. One of the pictures notes in its caption that the outer width of brick is connected to the backup only by a series of header bricks. Now, that was the standard way to construct masonry buildings in the 19th and into the 20th century. What, if anything, is different about these buildings? Problems should be clearly explained and documented before a decision is made on such a major intervention. Should a decision be made to reconstruct the facades, the next problem is that the details for reconstruction are woefully inadequate. Sample replacement bricks, mortar, and jointing must be provided. Some of the cornices to be removed and replaced are missing sections of wood paneling. Are these missing features to be replaced? The proposed window and storefront drawings are rudimentary. Where are the details for all these features? It isn't clear whether the reconstruction is supposed to include the ground floors and storefronts. The ground floors vary from building to building, but only one type is drawn as both an existing and proposed condition. Is this intended to be a template for all of them? Materials, dimension, and details need to be shown. It seems impossible to tell from this presentation what is being approved. When such significant interventions and loss of historic material are proposed, we expect that the reconstructed facades will be high-quality restorations of historic conditions. We also expect that this work will be properly documented for the Commission. Now, these details should not be left to the staff in this case, and this is not because the staff aren't capable, but because rules requires the staff to approve approximations of generic historic designs rather than high-quality, accurate reproductions. This proposal, as it stands, gives us no confidence that high-quality work is being proposed. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I've promoted you to panelist. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC understands that this work is necessary because these buildings have deteriorated. HDC has undertaken a great deal of advocacy on behalf of buildings at risk of demolition or neglect, and we are pleased to see that the situation here is being addressed. HDC finds much of the proposed work appropriate, but given that this application includes proposed work for 6 affected buildings, HDC believes the applicant should be asked to hire an architectural historic preservation consultant to assist with detailing. For example, the window sills should extend no further than 2 inches on either side of the windows and should include a base and a drip. The lintels should extend no more than 4 inches on either side of the window heads and should also include a drip. Importantly, the proposed option B for buildings 228 and 230 Court Street, detailed on drawing 18, which proposes to change the window configuration from 1/1 to 2/1, is inappropriate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised in the attendees list, so I will note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 6 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. Would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
For the first testimony, it is the structural stability. It's the biggest concern on this proposal, and the sizing of the brick and the sizing of the current mortar. That's what was documented on this presentation, and it's added to the plans. The full set of filing plans are actually not shown in here because this is more of a presentation, but detailing for option B was put in for a just in case scenario once the project is actually under construction. The chances that we were going for the option B, I would say less than 5% from all the research and the studies that were done on these buildings, but they have to be taken in consideration. The cornices currently, as of today, they are, for the most part, they are in good shape, but if they need restoration, they are matched to the exact. So they will be removed and put back even at option B with the exception of any broken sections that have to be repaired. If additional detailing is needed, we could definitely provide so on the filings. But delaying the construction, it's no one's benefit. It's been an ongoing project for more than a year and a half, and every day it eats up into these bricks, especially with the exposure after the probes were ordered by the Department of.
All right, thank you. Corey, I don't know if you want to address anything with respect to the details. Of course, staff always requires very detailed sections for windows and reconstruction.
Sure, and I think, the questions were asked, I think, a little bit before about is it advantageous or smart to just replace the outer white versus full reconstruction? I mean, the good thing about replacing just the outer white, in addition to maintaining some of the original wall itself, even if it's the backup, is that it retains the actual original openings at their original size, so ensures those things are done correctly. And so when you think about it, this is really pretty simple. If it is just the face brick replacement, there's not that many details. In fact, I think the only one is what you see on the screen, which is that slightly protruding apron beneath the cornice. The rest is just plain brickwork. So if we get the brick match right, the mortar joint size right, all of those types of things, that's it. Everything else will turn out well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, let's make a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, so we have this situation with these several buildings that are in very deteriorated shape, and as HDC noted and as the applicant noted, this has been going on for some time, and I do want to thank our staff, Winnie, and of course Corey and John, for being so proactive and diligent and engaging with DOB and our own consulting engineer on a site. I know this involved many site visits. And so this is, I, pretty well documented as a very serious condition. And I think that we want to commend you for bringing this in and dealing with it proactively before we have a more hazardous condition and a full collapse. And so the goal is ideally to just replace the outer width of brick. And then as they do the removals of the stucco and the outer width of brick, should they find that there is more deterioration with the backup, they would then move to an option B. Of course, they would stop before doing that and consult with the staff, and we would make sure that we had all of the information we needed to allow that to proceed with respect to details and other measures. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Sort of interesting. These sound. I don't really know how to answer the problem. Staff. Absolutely. Of course. Bricks. Appropriate are not necessarily bricks that we hope in 150 years will look like current bricks, but will actually. Whether that involves salvage bricks from locations, new bricks with a different finish than they might have 1840. I think that should be the goal. I think also that the same care goes to the choice of the grout, color of the grout, nature, relationship of the grout to the base of the brick. All these details should be looked at carefully. I don't think that
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg? Oh, and I do want to just say we always, even with just proposals to do brick patching and repointing, always require mortar samples and brick samples for final review and approval.
So I think this is appropriate and want to address a few things. First of all, it's time critical. And so I very much want to approve it, want to see the work happen as quickly as possible. Second of all, to address 2 points Commissioner Goldblum brought up. The Brick Institute does not recommend reuse of bricks. This is because when a brick is first used, it has open cells that bond with the mortar. That fills it forever. And so if you reuse a brick, it's never going to be as good. And so as much as I understand the desire, it doesn't make much sense. The second thing is, it is sort of inevitable, and this is a problem, and I don't think there's a good answer, the reconstruction looking a little Disneyland, because you've got to use new materials that don't have 150 years of wear and aren't, just because the wear is different, getting a certain variation. And so the projects look too pristine, and I don't think there's any good solution to that problem, because finding weathered bricks means it's not going to last as long. but I think it's approvable.
We required them to salvage the bricks, so.
Interesting.
All right, Commissioner Chen.
Couldn't agree more. I'm thinking of the Edward Mooney House, which is went through a similar reconstruction, and the brick really didn't come out nice because of that. It's the oldest house in Chinatown area, and so. But I had to commend the staff and John and the applicant. I think given that we just have the seismic issue, this couldn't be more timely. We have similar issues in my district where the facade peeled off, and I think they caught it in time. So, no, I agree with Commissioner Ginsburg and the rest of the comment that the sooner get this done, the better.
Okay. Vice Chair Bland.
I think what we're looking at is just we're bowing to reality. This is what happens sometimes to old buildings. And I think the solutions that have been suggested are reasonable and good. Regarding the rare times when new construction is required, I'll just say that for about 30 plus years, I parked my car in a carriage house on College Place that had been totally reconstructed. It must have been very early on in the commission's history because I started parking there in 1973 or something. And there was a plaque on it describing that this is a new construction. But, it was part of a row of similar, if not exactly the same. But the plaque made it clear that this was a reconstruction. I don't know what the circumstances were, but something like this probably. And it was a good solution. Did it look old and old and old? No, maybe not, but at some point it probably will. In any event, I don't know what the options would be other than what we're looking at, and it seems to me to be quite reasonable and thoroughly studied, and I support what has been suggested.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
First of all, I want to commend the staff for kind of accidentally falling upon this issue.
Winnie flagged it, so.
Yeah, it's really kind of amazing, and it's wonderful because these buildings have been here for a long time, and it's actually, as I said earlier, an important little commercial strip between Warren and Baltic on Court Street. And one thing I'm not concerned about, even as the new brick moves in, is whether or not this kind of small store commercial strip feel is going to be retained, because it's here and very strong, and you can see it in the individual shops, some of which, like this local butcher, Staubitz, I think they've been there like 40 years or something. So I'm very thankful that this has come before us. And I concur with my colleagues that I feel like it is being addressed in the proper way. And I know that the staff and I hope the applicant will continue to work very closely with the staff who will be to make sure that all of the details are worked out here, and that this project can proceed and be successful. So I can approve this.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Chu.
Yeah, I don't have a lot more to add to my fellow commissioners' comments. I will just say that I share the same concern about the look of a new facade, because essentially it's the whole line of all the facades that will be, the face layer will definitely be replaced in both option A and B. At the same time, I feel like for such a large scope of facade reconstruction that it'd be odd to make it try to look all old when it's not. in terms of Mark's comment about the brick and its characters and pores, I think the difference really is here that this is being adhered to another layer, and therefore new construction is usually cavity wall construction. It doesn't have to stick to another layer of brick behind. So definitely the biggest concern I have is the care, as my fellow commissioners have noted, in the selection of the molded brick, right? It's got to be, and that the coursing of it is especially careful and attentive, because vertical and horizontal coursing to fixed window openings will be challenging, because this is usually done all at once, and that sets those openings with the back wall. Now they will not be in alignment. They're essentially just adhered to it, but placed in front without the corresponding horizontal datum. So I trust that staff will work carefully.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master?
Yeah, I agree with the other commissioners' comments, Commissioner Goldblum and Commissioner Ginsburg. And I just want to say thank you to Winnie for flagging this and working so hard on this project. It's really tremendous. I'm so glad that you went above and beyond and raised this issue.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I think that, these buildings really need to be addressed as soon as possible, which they're doing, which I think is the right thing. And I think, the staff will work with them to make sure that it's done in the appropriate way. But the main thing here is, we've got a very serious condition that has to be addressed, immediately. And I think in general, what they presented as the way they're going to go about it is totally appropriate. So just a matter of supervising them, making sure detail is carried out.
Great, okay, thank you. All right, so I think we'll make a motion to approve each one with the condition, of course, that they continue to work closely with the staff on all of the details, coursing, and final approvals of brick and mortar. And so Commissioner Goldblum, what we're going to do is we're going to read the first one fully. And then for all of the others, you're going to read just the top description with the docket number, building description, and application, and say, I move that we adopt the motion I read previously.
Regarding 214 Fourth Street, Park District,
I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Cobble Hill Historic District. I also note that this building was developed as part of a row of seemingly identical houses built in two sections, that at the time of designation, storefronts and signage at the ground floors of the row varied, but the upper floors were generally unified and featured brick or stucco-clad brick front facades with consistent window sizes, that the front facades are currently separating from the backup brick, resulting in violations from the Department of Buildings as well as LPC. I further note that all the buildings in the row are individually owned, but their deteriorated conditions are consistent, are being addressed together under a single presentation. I recommend approval, finding that the work will address an existing safety hazard, which, if unattended, could result in catastrophic failure of the front facade. That the removal of the outer white brickwork at the upper floors and stucco cladding on some of the houses is warranted by the deteriorated conditions. That the brick will be replaced with new brick, matching the historic brick in terms of color, size, texture, and bond pattern, and the pointing mortar will match the historic mortar in terms of joint dimensions, color, texture, and tooling. That the new outer white brickwork will be tied back to the existing backup masonry and interior structural elements with mechanical ties that are not visible from the exterior. That the existing elements to remain in place or be removed and reinstalled will include, but will not be limited to, the storefront infill at the ground floor, brownstone sills and lintels, and the windows at upper floors, and the cornice at the top of the facade, as well as existing backup masonry, which will be shored in place to facilitate the work. That the work will return the building and the row closer to its appearance and will ensure a structurally sound and good condition. In the case that it is discovered during the course of the reconstruction that the replacement of the outer white brickwork is not sufficient to address the structural instability of the facade, and reconstruction of the entire facade is found to be warranted by a structural engineering confirmed by either DOB engineers or the engineer on retainer to the LPC, I further find that the original design materials and details of the facade will be matched and or recreated, and that the change in construction details will not be discernible from the street. That the use of metal-clad wood windows, if proposed, instead of wood for the replacement of multi-light double-hung windows, 6/6 at 214, 216, and 218, and 2/1 at 222, 228, and 230 in this larger scope of work, will not call undue attention to itself, and that the windows will match the historic ones in terms of operation, configuration, profiles, and details. And that the missing cornice at 216 will be recreated in fiberglass to match the remaining historic cornices and other buildings in the row, restoring this significant feature to the row. In either case, I recommend that the utmost care be taken during the removal process to maximize the salvaging and reinstallation of the historic elements and to recreate all the details, including the brick apron below the cornices and profiled lintels at 222, 228, and 230.
All right, Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
Right. John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
In favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that one's approved. We have to do a motion for each property, so we're going to do that.
Regarding 216 Court Street in the Cobble Hill Historic District, the application is to reconstruct portions of the front facade. I recommend that we approve a motion similar to the one I just read for the previous
Right.
project.
And we just have to read the docket number,
Docket number.
building description and application.
Ooh, LPC,
Just that top one.
LPC 24-04539, a row house built in the early 1850s. The application is to reconstruct portions of the front facade.
And
Which else?
All right, and we move that.
And then I move to
Adopt the
adopt
same.
a resolution identical to the one I just read for the previous application.
Perfect. Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
I'll get it right by the end.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg, Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Lufty.
Lutfi, aye.
Sorry. Commissioner Master,
Aye.
9 in favor, 9 opposed, the motion passes.
All right, in regards to LPC 24-04537 Court Street in the Cobble Hill Historic District, a row house built in the early 1850s. The application is to reconstruct portions of the front facade. I move that we adopt a resolution identical to the previous two, for the previous two projects.
All right, and Vice Chair Bland, would you second that one?
Second.
All right, John.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland, Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
9 in favor, 9 opposed, the motion passes.
And as regards LPC 24-04553 at 222 Court Street in the Cobble Hill Historic District, the row house with neo-Breck style elements built in the early 1850s. The application is to reconstruct portions of the front facade. I recommend that we adopt a proposal identical to the ones that we just adopted for the last three projects.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that one?
Gladly second.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland, Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi, Commissioner Master.
Aye.
9 in favor, 9 opposed, the motion passes.
Regarding LPC 24-00269-228 Court Street in the Cobble Hill Historic District, a row house with neo-Breck style elements built in the early 1850s. The application is to reconstruct portions of the front facade. I recommend that we adopt a resolution identical to the previous four.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
Second.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland, Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Regarding LPC 24-07619 to 30 Court Street in the Cobble Hill Historic District, a row house with neo-Gothic style elements built in the early 1850s, and the application is to reconstruct portions of the front facade. I recommend that we adopt a resolution identical to the previous four.
Okay, and Commissioner Master, would you second that one?
Second.
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland. Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Master.
Aye.
9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's the approval. Please continue to work very closely with Winnie and team here, okay? Thank you. Have a good day. Good luck. All right, we'll move to the next public hearing item.
Okay, we're now going to move to public hearing items 7 and 8. These two are also being presented together, so I'll do some sort of shuffling of the way I read this in. So both of these items are 2530 Grand Concourse, the Dollar Savings Bank, now Immigrant Savings Bank, and First Floor Interior, individual interior landmarks. Both in the borough, all in the borough of the Bronx, block 3154, lot 7501. Both applications are for certificates of appropriateness, and they pertain to the building, which is a classicizing Art Deco style bank building with an office and clock tower, an interior banking hall designed by Halsey, McCormick, and Helmer, and built in 1932 to 33, and expanded by the same firm in 1937 to 38 and 1949 to 52. The first application, Item 7, LPC 24-08045, is an application to establish a master plan governing the future installation of signage. Second application, Item 8, LPC 24-06751, is an application to use substitute materials at the clock.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay? Hi, my name is Lauren George. I'm with C&B Consulting, and I'm very happy to be here with you today on behalf of the owner of the property, Mad Equity. You may recall that we brought you an adaptive reuse of the banking hall from this building. Sorry, I'm going to advance the slides there. Just about 2 years ago, and we're excited to be finally nearing TCO for that new supermarket at this corner of Grand Concourse and Fordham Road in the Bronx. I'm joined today by my colleague Alexandra Abreu-Pina from Wolfgang Architects, who will present you the details of this proposal. And we also have the construction director, GDI, Fawaz Ali, I hope, on Zoom, I believe, to answer questions you may have pertaining to the clock restoration. As Corey mentioned, the Dollar Savings Bank 2530 Grand Concourse consists of a 3-story banking hall and a 10-story office tower, surmounted by a 150-foot tall clock tower. All 3 phases of the building were designed by Adolf Mueller from Halsey, McCormick, and Helmer. This was originally the Dollar Savings Bank, the first thrift institution ever to be established in the Bronx, one of the few individual landmarks in the Bronx, I'll note. This section is now the southernmost bay of the banking hall. Here you can see it on the right here. The building was completed in 33 and then expanded 100 feet to the north along the Grand Concourse in 1937. And the same design as the original branch bank in ashlar granite. The Dollar Savings Bank, then there was a tower finished in 1950, and that became the headquarters of the Dollar Savings Bank, which the Dollar Savings Bank occupied this building until 92, and then it went into receivership and was sold to Immigrant Savings Bank. Immigrant later sold to Apple Savings Bank, and that closed its branch here in 2014. The building has been vacant, unfortunately, since 2014, and Mad Equities purchased this building from the previous owner recently in the last couple of years and planned a major investment. They applied for national register status and are obtaining historic tax credits to restore the building. And today we're here to present to you the signage master plan and clock restoration. So the banking hall is the dominant presence on the Grand Concourse. If you go there, it's the tallest building in the neighborhood. Like I said, in polished ashlar granite, the 150-foot long banking hall is symmetrically arranged with double height entries flanking 3 double height windows opening onto the banking hall. The entry bays are capped by projecting granite canopies with large Liberty Head coin reliefs above. Historically, these coins contained illuminated signage for the bank. The base of the office tower is clad in the same polished ashlar granite with a large double height opening in the center of the tower that goes into the extended banking hall within. The upper 8 stories of the office tower and the clock tower at the roof are clad in orange brick with terracotta spandrels and trim. 12-foot diameter clocks, once with glass faces and bronze hands and hour markers, are located on each of the 4 sides of the clock tower. Let me give you some historic photos, sorry. That is a historic photo there, okay. So, like I said, historically the clocks were illuminated from within, making the tower a beacon within the neighborhood. We're pleased to be, so this is the banking hall. Sorry, I'm a little ahead of myself. From 33. And you can see the signage. It was illuminated and external signage that was neon. There was even a sign at the very southernmost part of the banking hall here in the left photo. And there were neon signs at the top of the tower here as well. So we're pleased to be before you today, proposing a restoration of the clocks with slight modification and a reinitiating or bringing back sort of a copy of the original signage in LED rather than neon to try to recreate this beacon as it once was. And this is a more recent photo when it had Emigrant Savings Bank, and you can see the damage that occurred to the clock. There were actually a point where we had to take down some of the glass because it was so damaged it was falling down. It was a public safety issue. And I will bring Sandra.
Morning, I'm Alexandra Rufina. I'm with Alpine Architects. We're the architect team working with Mad Equities on this job, and I'll be going through the scope for both the restoration of the clock tower and the signage master plan for the Grand Concourse 3530 building. So we're going to start with the clock. So the clock historically at the top of the tower had 4 faces. Each were made of bronze frames with dials and a white lead glass panel at the back. They, as Lauren mentioned, they were operating and they were illuminated in the past. Currently, all of the frames and white lead glass have been removed because of damages and for safety. So right now, we're in the process of trying to clean everything up. So you can see here on the right photo at the top of the tower, there was a lot of damage to the white lead glass, and the frames were heavily damaged as well. We'll see a picture in a couple slides. So the white lead glass is not environmentally friendly. It is a very heavy material. It's not very sustainable. So we are planning, and we'd love to use a white polycarbonate panel, which we brought a sample for you guys to look at today. That is a lightweight material. It will give the same look, and it will present the same way as the white lead glass, and it will be more sustainable. The proposed plan entails replacing the clock frame with new aluminum sheet metal to match the existing design and finish of the clock. The dials from the original clock will be reused as wherever it could be, wherever remained usable, and any missing dials will be replicated with the new aluminum sheet metal to match the existing one. To illuminate, and you can see here at the top right, one of the frames that were taken down for safety. It's heavily damaged. There's a lot of corrosion, and they can't really support material at the moment. So the plan is to use the aluminum sheet metal to recreate the frame, and additionally, we'll be using the 2 4-inch aluminum brackets. If you can see this next image there, the light gray on the left of the page, those vertical aluminum brackets will hold 2 halogen tubes that will illuminate the clocks just like they were in the past. And all of the internal workings for the electricity will be indoors. It won't be exposed at all. And that will be behind the white polycarbonate panel. Overall, we just want to make sure that, point out that The clock frame will be coated aluminum, so it's going to protect the dials, whatever existing dials we will be able to use. It'll protect it from being from corrosion, and we'll be having washers and silicones added to the frame in order to create a barrier between the different metals wherever necessary. So the whole for the clock, really, the goal is to use new, modern, sustainable materials that are going to be very durable. They're going to be lightweight, and it's going to keep preserving the same look that the original clock had. And I should also note that they will have a new motor indoors where the previous clock had a motor, and this will help actually give real time. So it'll be a functioning clock and let you take it. And we can have our contractor give some details later after, if you guys have any questions. And moving on to the signage master plan. Like Lauren mentioned, we're trying to bring back all of these historic signages back into the building. They're on the west portion of the building, which is the front on Grand Concourse. You see the two Liberator heads at the top of the banking hall. And then on the south portion, we want to bring back both the banking hall signage and then at the top of the tower as well and on the east side where the Immigrant Savings Bank billboard used to be. So starting with the Liberty Head points relief above the bank entrances, historically these were illuminated with neon signage for the bank. The Liberty Heads were removed at an unknown date, but the existing holes for the original lightings are still there. So we're trying to reuse those as much as possible. The proposed work is to do open face LED neon channel letters, as you can see from the images on the right. And it'll have a stainless steel return. So the sign for these two locations will say "Find Fair" for the supermarket at the banking hall. And the goal is that they'll be installed on a channel, and then the horizontal channel will attach to the existing facade. That way, it's not an individual letter penetration for each word, for each letter, sorry. I should note that on the top left image, you'll see vaguely there's two vertical banners that were already previously approved for the banking hall for the supermarket, so those will still remain. Then on the west signage, in 1930, the bank at the bottom of the south banking hall, there was a dollar savings bank, as you can see on the bottom left. And then on the top left, there's the Towers Dollar Savings Bank signage. So we're proposing to bring back both signage locations. We'll have the bottom banking hall signage to say "Find Fair" for the supermarket. And then at the top, right now we just have it as a general signage. We're really just looking at location for this portion. It might be for the tenant later on the tower. That's still to be determined who the tenant will be. And we're proposing the same to be open LED channel letters with stainless steel return on a horizontal channel that will attach to the facade, and it will be illuminated as well. And it won't have any exposed illuminated or electricity or anything like that. I should mention that. And then lastly, on the east facade, we want to bring back at the top of the tower where the elevator bulkhead used to be, or well, still is, bring back the Dollar Savings Bank location for new signage. Again, still general because we don't know who the tower tenant will be. And it's the same thing. All of these signages will be the same. It's open LED, neon LED letter with stainless steel return. And then we just wanted to point out just this is in the vicinity of this building, like right around the corners, and each side of this location is just very congested with different billboards and signages all over the place. This is just a little bit of what you can see when you walk through Grand Concourse. There's a lot more. And then, yeah, I just wanted to walk you through some renderings. This will be for the clock, sorry. The clock will look the same, it will be illuminated, and it will be operable. This is a rendering just to get an understanding of how the frame will work, and the idea to use the existing dials wherever possible. And this is for one of the signage renderings for the top of the tower. So overall, we just wanted to reiterate the clock will look the same. It'll be operable. It'll be illuminated like the previous historical clock, but it will be made of new, sustainable, durable materials and lightweight. And for the signage, we're using the same type of signage as before. It's going to be LED, which is a newer way to do the signage with a stainless steel return and give the same look around all faces of the building. We wanted to know that the contractor will be using for the clock, it's American clock, and they've restored clocks at other towers in New York City, including Bronx Clock in the Potomac Park Pool Bathhouse. Then we get Moynihan Station, Central Clock, and the new Grand Kitchen, and Customs House Clock, River Hatch Stadium, and 601 Lexington Engagement Refresh.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, questions? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So with the polycarbonate that you're planning to use for the clock, my understanding of polycarbonate is you can get a warranty for about 10 years against yellowing. What assurance do you have that after 10 years it won't yellow? Because I'm just concerned about
Good question. I don't know if that'll be a better question for the DC to answer or the contractor to answer. Call. Just go on. Unmute yourself. Let us know you heard the question.
Yeah, it came down.
Good morning.
Good morning, boss. I don't know if you were.
New text message from Lauren George.
Can you hear me?
I don't know if you had a chance to hear the question, but it was regarding the white polycarbonate, a 10-year warranty for yellowing, and they just want to make sure that what would happen in 10 years if it yellows, or what our plans would be.
Bill, we've had clocks that has been done for over 15 years, and they're still in the condition as they were installed.
With the polycarbonate material?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you say 15 or 50? I think
15.
15. Okay.
Why can't you?
Right. Okay.
Then I have, can I
Go
ask
ahead,
you, why are you using aluminum instead of bronze for the replacement pieces of the clock?
In terms of the material itself, the actual installer, the supplier, the installer has recommended this because of the nature in which this is installed and the location of it being installed, the height. They said that the material itself is better to work with. It's malleable to the bending. The bronze, as of right now, first of all, it's crazy expensive, and two, in fabrication today, it's more susceptible for fracture, etc. So in terms of using the aluminum, it's a softer material, yet still it will withstand the loads, the pressure, the wind loads, etc. that will be against it on the upper floors.
Thank you. Yeah, just one other thing.
Shoot.
Now they make glass that looks like this. I realize it would be heavier. Is that the only reason you're not using it?
So I'm gonna be quite frank with you guys, and do not laugh when I say this. It's a target upstairs, no pun intended. When we came to the site, this had bullet holes in it, and the glass will fracture against bullet holes, BB guns, whatever they were shooting against it, and that may tend to fall on someone walking in the street. So that's one of the reasons why we're choosing to go with the polycarbonate, where it I'm not saying that it won't get a hole, but it's not going to break, shatter, and fall on someone.
Thank you.
The other questions?
Sure.
Commissioner,
Yeah, I mean, I think the question was answered. We do have codes that prevent against that condition happening. Glass has to be tempered, laminated, et cetera, et cetera. Is this lit from behind?
Yes.
Okay. I was also looking at some of the details, and you've got steel mixed with aluminum, which will rust and cause galvanic action. So that's a bigger.
The steel is actually on the inside of it that will be coated. There is washers and rubber grommets between the materials, which will obviously act as a thermal break, so you won't have reaction between the two materials.
did you consider the steel on the outside instead of aluminum?
The aluminum won't rust on the outside, hence the reason why we went with the aluminum. Steel, based on my experience over the years, even if it's coated, you can put epoxy on it. Steel is steel; it tends to rust. I've done many restorations from working Chelsea Market to 59th Street under the bridge at Costa Vino's Food Emporium to 20 Bruckner Boulevard. They all had the same issues. The steel at 59th Street, actually, it was restored. The windows were restored, and a couple years after, you're having the rust again.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Shoot.
Okay, I just have one question about the signage. So the signs at the top of the tower are intended to be accessory signage for the tenant when you get a tenant. And is the height that you're prescribing and the type, which is the open channel letter, set in this master plan proposal okay.
Some heights, some dimensions. Just noted that it won't be any bigger than the previous signages, and it won't have or increase the surface level or the illumination levels than the previous Dollar Savings Bank signage had on the building.
Okay. All right. If there are no questions, let's move to public testimony. And I see there's no one in the hearing room to speak, so I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a couple of hands raised in our attendees list. The first being Jeremy Woodoff from Save America's Clocks. Jeremy Woodoff, I am promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jeremy Woodoff, and today I'm speaking for Save America's Clocks. Save America's Clocks is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to locating, inventorying, and assisting in the preservation and maintenance of all of America's public clocks. Here in New York, we have assisted in the restoration of several designated landmark sidewalk post clocks, as well as tower clocks. Our board member, Marvin Schneider, is the city's official clock master who keeps city-owned public clocks running and on time. We are pleased to support this proposal for restoration of the clock dials in the tower of the Dollar Savings Bank building and the return of the clock to working order. As a mid-20th century electrically operated clock, the mechanism itself is of little interest and anyway is not designated. But the importance of restoring the clock to working order as an amenity of the Fordham neighborhood shouldn't be minimized. It will send a message that the owner cares for the building, the neighborhood, and its residents. We learned in the presentation that this is to be a Tax Act project, and that means that we need to be especially careful that the restoration be of high quality and therefore our suggestions about the clock dial have added importance. We don't object to the substitution of polycarbonate for glass, although we can't agree that polycarbonate is a sustainable material as opposed to glass. However, it must be thick enough that it maintains a flat surface. I believe the applicant held up a piece of polycarbonate during the presentation, and we're afraid something that thin will oil can and from the street with reflections of light not look very flat. So it needs to be thick enough that it looks like glass. It also needs to be treated to reduce the tendency of the material to yellow after several years. We also recommend that the visible dial framework be repaired in kind with bronze and not with aluminum as shown. Otherwise, there will be an inconsistency in color and weathering between the bronze number markers and hands and the rest of the dial. And though bronze may be more expensive than aluminum, there's not a lot of material here. And we think it's very important that that material be replaced in kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I am promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this work largely appropriate, but notes that the signage above the windows at the top of the banking hall, as seen on page 23, appears to be squeezed. Perhaps a different size or location for the signage would be more appropriate. Further, we are thrilled that the applicant is restoring the building's clock. For information and clarification, we wonder why the applicant has chosen aluminum rather than the original bronze for clock repair. We don't know that this would affect the appropriateness of the application, but we are interested to know how they arrived at that choice of materials. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised, so I will note for the record that Bronx Community Board 7 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to ask if you'd like to respond to some of the comments raised in testimony. I think there was a lot of support for the restoration of the clock, but the question about using bronze in lieu of, or using the aluminum in lieu of bronze, and some suggestions about the thickness for the polycarbonate. And there was also a comment on the top signage.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So let's just go with, in terms of the actual dials. It's not a significant amount of them that are missing. It's probably 2 or 3 of them that were, 2 were missing, and I think 1 of them were damaged. So that I don't think we have any issues with in trying to get the bronze sheet metal and replicate those. That I'll relate to the fabricator. In terms of the polycarbonate, it will not, just so we're all on the same page, the polycarbonate will be in segments due to the size of the clock, and exactly for that reason, we are doing this in 4 pieces to mimic exactly what was there prior. The glass also was in 4 pieces, so we're going back to the original structure, the original design, and the polycarbonate that we have actually was used on some of the other clocks in a full face. To date, there are no issues with them, but again, because it's being fabricated into 4 segments, the structure of it is significantly stronger than it would have been if it was a full face. The other one was the aluminum versus the bronze. And again, it's a mixture of reasons. Creates a significant cost in terms of fabrication. Today, the material at hand is not obviously it was before. They've tried in certain situations, and it is susceptible to fracture. And obviously, if you have that now during fabrication, later on down the line, you're gonna have to go back and try to repair and mess with this clock again, which we're trying not to. Aluminum, again, it's a softer material to bend. We'll get the right curves, the curvature, the structure, the strength, everything will be there with the aluminum. Of course, it's readily available, easily available. What else do we have? We did
And
the
then
aluminum,
just
we did
quickly,
the, shoot.
yeah, but one last thing on the clock. I think there was also a suggestion to treat the polycarbonate to prevent the yellowing. And is that something that is possible that would give it even longer than the 15 years?
I have no issue of finding out. I have no issue of finding out. You want to listen, the last person who wants to go back up and touch that clock will be me. Trust me.
Okay.
All right. So we will definitely look into it and find out from the fabricators. There's one more thing I want to touch on in terms of the dial, the motor. The motors will replace the old motors inside. Together with the motors, I know Alexander mentioned this. It is going to be connected to a controller, meaning that you will be able to change your time, daylight saving time, standard time. So year round, we will have the correct timing on the clock.
All right. And then
That's
the
it
last,
for me.
thank you. The last comment was on the signage at the top.
Yeah, look for the signage at the top.
The signage up top. Alex, you want to go on it?
Yeah, I think she's gonna answer. Thanks.
She noted that the rendering was squeezed. We will make sure that, and in the details in the presentation, there are dimensions. Like I mentioned earlier, we will make sure that it does not increase in size or surface area than the previous Dollar Savings Bank lettering, and it will be illuminated as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Commissioners, any final questions on this one? All right, Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we have two components to this application. One is the restoration of the clock, and the other is the master plan for future signage, which is based on historic signage at the building that was illuminated neon signage at the Liberty Head motifs, the side of the lower portion of the building and at the top of the tower. And we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, I think we raised a few concerns, particularly on the clock that they've addressed. And so I would say this is approvable and they should work with staff to address those concerns, but that they had pretty reasonable answers of why they were doing what they were doing. And the signage seems reasonable to me. It will hopefully recreate what was there a number of years ago.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm glad that the Q&A helped to address a lot of the questions about the material and the clock. But as we sit here, I'm looking over the Immigrant Savings Bank sign across the way, and like out the window. So it really, hopefully, is manageable. I highly recommend they work with the staff. Hopefully, it's not too long a name, and successful.
Okay, thanks. Vice Chair Bland?
My two colleagues have stated my position very well, so I don't need to say it further.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I agree. They have. I just want to emphasize on the signage. This, what's here seems like a little bit of an approximation, a placeholder. And depending upon who it is, if it's a tenant with like a 3-word name versus a 1-word name, it's really going to affect the dimensions and the spacing, both on the top of the building and on the tower. So, and everywhere, really. Same with the, so I recommend, so I agree that it's important to work with staff on this. I'm refining everything with the signage.
Okay. Commissioner Chu?
I guess I'm an outlier here. I feel that the clock is such the visual target and focus of this tower that I feel uncomfortable with the poly. I think it should be glass. And I also agree with one of the comments made earlier that the exposed element should be bronze.
Commissioner Master?
I think, I agree with Commissioner Ginsburg. I think that for the reasons that they had stated, I think the polycarbonate is fine. I think that they had said that the hands of the clock, they were fine with it being bronze, but
Yeah.
that the exterior, for other reasons, it just made more sense to be aluminum. That made a lot of sense to me. I think that in terms of the signage, they had reassured us that the signage would be corresponding to the tenants and that it would maintain the configuration of the historic signage. So I can find this appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I'm glad that they're restoring this, the clock, and I think with the provisions that the staff work with them closely on the materials and, restoration in general, that'll be fine. And as others have expressed, the signage on the tower and the upper part of the building needs to be associated with the building use, and the exact dimensions that aren't presented here need to be worked out with the staff. But in general, I think, it's good that they're doing this master plan, the signage down below. I don't have any problem with the signage at the ground level.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum?
I think that I can accept the application as is if there are measures in place for the staff to occasionally examine it, see if things are failing. I think that the aluminum is less of a concern for me than glass versus plexi. I'm not sure I understand. It's so very large that they won't start to curl and flex. Because it's such a visible beacon. Figure out some method of verification that's kind of built in that make sure that things start to look bad and probably to cite them. I would recommend to the applicant, although I wouldn't vote against it, we would vote for it, that if they consider the glass, I don't think it would be a big difference in cost.
Okay. All right, so I think what we can do is we can support these proposals. For the master plan for the signage, it would be with the modification that, or the recommendation that they, or requirement that they work closely with the staff to develop the parameters for the signage at the top, and that it be associated with a tenant in the building. And for the clock, I think we can approve it with the condition that, maybe that it be inspected in a certain period of time. I don't know, 5 years.
Sure.
And that, so we'll approve it with that. But, also ask them to continue to explore using glass, but with the caveat on the inspection that and all the details being worked out with staff that the polycarbonate is appropriate. So Commissioner Ginsburg, would
So
you?
there are two here.
There's two, yeah. Do you want to do one and?
I can do both or one or whatever.
Why don't you do the first one? I'll do the second one so you don't
Okay.
have to do too many. Okay.
With regards to LPC 24-08045, 2530 Grand Concourse, Dollar Saving Bank, now Immigrant Savings Bank, and first floor interior individual interior landmark, a classicizing Art Deco style building with an office and clock tower, an interior banking hall designed by Halsey, McCormick, and Helmer, and built in 1932-33 and expanded by the same firm in 1937-38 and 1949-1952. Application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of signage. I recommend approval with modifications that the Liberty Head silver dollar motif from the north and south banking hall entrances, the south lot line facade of the banking hall, and the south and east elevations of the tower have historically been used for signage, including illuminated signage. Therefore, the presence of similar signage at these locations is in keeping with the commercial evolution of the building, that the proposed scale, placement, material, and open-face channel neon-style letters of the signage will recall the historic signage while utilizing modern LED technology, that the installation of the signs will not damage the historic fabric, that the work is reversible, that the cumulative amount of signage will not overwhelm the individual landmark, and that the establishment of a master plan will provide for a unified pattern of signage over time, that the tower portion of the building was historically used as office space for the bank, and the featured bank signage reflecting this use, and the tower and banking hall are currently separate spaces with potential for different tenants, and the specific criteria for future signage, including maximum height, length, dimension, has not been identified. Therefore, I recommend that the future signage at the tower and banking hall be limited to accessory uses related to tenants of each portion of the building respectively, and the applicant work with staff to define dimensional parameters for new signage to match the historic scale.
Or just define the parameters, yeah. Okay. All right, Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland. Aye. Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu. Aye. Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum. Aye. Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that one's approved, and I'll make the next motion. In the matter of docket number 24-06751, 2530 Grand Concourse, the Dollar Savings Bank, now Immigrant Savings Bank, and first floor interior, individual and interior landmark, a classicizing Art Deco style bank building with an office and clock tower and interior banking hall designed by Halsey, McCormick, and Helmer, and built in 1932-33 and expanded by the same firm in 1937-38 and 1949-52. This is an application to use substitute materials at the clock. And I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the replacement of the existing clock face assembly is warranted by the deteriorated condition of the existing components, that the historic glazed panels and bronze hands and hour markers were simply designed and have been damaged over time. Therefore, their replacement will not eliminate any highly decorative or intact assembly, that the existing clock is highly exposed to the elements and difficult to access on the exterior side, supporting the use of alternative materials that may require less maintenance over time, that the new cast aluminum will be used to replace missing and damaged historic bronze, and that the historic bronze material will be salvaged and reused where possible, thereby retaining historic fabric. And I believe that includes all of the numbers, where if they're missing at the numbers will be replaced with bronze, and that the aluminum will have a coating to simulate the patinated bronze, and that the use of a different material will not be perceptible due to the height of this installation above the ground, that the aluminum hands and hour markers will match the historic in terms of dimensions, configuration, and details, that the potential, however, I recommend that I require, this approval is contingent upon the applicant working with the staff on the details and treatment of the existing and new materials to ensure that these materials are installed in a manner that avoids deterioration, and that the approval include a maintenance inspection after a 5-year period to ensure that the polycarbonate is retaining its integrity in terms of color and solidity. That we do encourage the use of glass, but otherwise with those caveats, the polycarbonate is deemed appropriate. Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion? Second. All right.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland, Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Chu,
Nay.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum. Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
All right. That's approved. Thank you. Thanks. All right. And we're going to move to another we're a little ahead of schedule, so we're going to move to the next public hearing item, which is item number 9.
Right. Hearing item number 9 is LPC 24-04987. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 622, Lot 39, 276 West 11th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a row house built in 1852 and altered with eclectic federal-style elements in 1924. The application is to remove historic elements, install a stoop, modify masonry openings, and install new infill, remove studio skylights, construct a rooftop addition, and alter the rear facade.
Let's go ahead.
Hi, my name is Josh Lecko. I'm a principal of Elizabeth Roberts Architects, and I'm here to present 276 West 11th Street. This project is proposed alterations to a townhouse in the West Village. The first piece of just some context. So here's the building in the middle of the historic district. The designation report notes that this house was built in the early 1850s, and it's a transitional Greek Revival Italianate style house. It was built as part of a pair with 278 West 11th Street. Here are photographs showing it in the 1930s and the 40s and the 1960s. This building was altered in 1924 when it was converted from being a townhouse to an apartment building. At that time, it lost its historic stoop, and there were extensive modifications made to the facade, which we'll look at here shortly. Here's a plan of the block showing position of the house. This block is made up of mixed building types. Some are apartment buildings, there are some townhouses, but the houses are not part of the And the back of the block is, let's say the donut is closed and you cannot see the back of the building. Here's a collage showing the street on West 11th Street, the south side of the street from West 4th at the left to Bleecker Street on the right, and our house is highlighted. Here are photographs showing the existing condition. So as I said, the house was altered in 1924 when the parlor floor windows were converted to arch top, and the stoop was removed and the entrance was moved to the street. This photograph shows our house in the context of the house to the west, which was originally in pairs. So these buildings were built and matching, and then in the 1920s they were both altered and the stoops were removed. And then in 2012, the building on the right was restored to its original appearance. So there are 3 components to this application. There's the front facade restoration, there's work to the roof, and there's work at the back of the building. So we'll start with the front. So here's just a drawing of the existing condition showing the building in context and the proposed condition. So in general, our proposal is to return the building to what, as far as we can reconstruct its original state and to match the neighboring house, which was restored in 2012. So the windows are being returned to their original configuration, and we're putting back a stoop and a brownstone surrounding front door and front. Here's a rendering showing proposed materials. It's a brick house. The existing brick, which we have some photos coming up, appears to be in reasonably good condition, and we restore it and install brownstone lintels and sills at the windows. Keep the existing original cornice and repair and repaint it. and create a new stoop and new brownstone surround. Here are just photographs of the existing conditions on the left. The property line of our house and the care house is on the right, and you can see that the brick is the same. The brick on the right obviously has already been restored. Here are photos of, we did some paint removal tests in the front facade, and you can see on the right, the original brick is an orange color. It appears to be in reasonably good shape. It needs to be repointed. In the middle and on the left, you can see the different brick that was used to patch in the 1920s, and presumably this is why they painted the facade, was to cover up these patches. Here are photographs of the existing door surround on the street level. It's a stucco door surround with some detail on it. Anyway, we stripped off the paint to see if it was like carved, limestone or something like that, and it appears to be stucco. Here are just photographs of the existing door on the street level. This is proposed to be removed. And this is the door at the neighboring house, which we propose to match in part. So let's see, without getting into too much detail here, the neighboring house was restored in 2012. And at that time, they put in a double door, not the Greek Revival door, which is here today. And we actually think that the double door that they put in at that time, which was approved at public hearing, is more appropriate for the house. So we're proposing to match that condition. But in general, the configuration and details of this entryway are what we're proposing. Here's just a photograph, a montage showing the windows in a little bit more detail. So there's 6/6 on the upper floors. There's 6/9 on the parlor floor. We propose to recreate the original window opening sizes of the parlor, which you can see from the patch brick, and also because they would have matched the neighbor. Here are photos of the existing conditions and photos of the same windows on the neighboring house, showing more or less the conditions that we hope to recreate. So again, there's brownstone lintels with simple detailing, 6/6 windows in the upper floor, 6/9 in the front. Here's a plan of the existing and proposed areaway. So obviously the areaway will change if we're restoring the stoop. So that at the top is showing proposed condition. We would recreate a historically appropriate fence at the front, step in through a gate, step down a couple steps to the entrance end of the stoop. Elevation of the same area, existing and proposed is on the top. In our proposed scheme, I should note that we propose to lower the sills of the garden floor windows somewhat to match the condition of the neighbor. Currently, the windows on our house are about a foot. The window sills are about a foot higher than they are on the adjacent building. So we propose to return them to a matching condition. Here are photographs of the existing areaway and photographs of the neighbor's area. Here's a drawing of the proposed stoop, gate, window bars with some ironwork. So in response to, let's see, we had originally proposed ironwork, which would be an exact match to the neighbors. And the community board had concerns about this. They felt that the neighbor's ironwork design was not ideal for this period. And upon further investigation, we actually agreed. So we came back, we looked at ironwork in the neighborhood, and we proposed to model our ironwork on a precedent building at 74 James Street, which we think was appropriate to the house. And we actually also believe that our existing window bars are in fact original, so we would like to restore this. Here are just photographs of the existing areaway, and again, photographs of what the neighbors have that we're more or less proposing to match. So that is the facade portion of the project. Now we're going to the roof. On the left is a plan of the existing rooftop, and the right is a plan of the proposed rooftop. So we propose to eliminate the current additions on the roof and replace them with a new addition in the center of the building, set significantly back from the street. I'm just going to go straight to a three-dimensional model. So you see on the left, the roof is kind of a complicated assemblage of 4 different structures. There's 2 sort of freestanding full-story additions on the left side of the roof. You actually can't get from one to the other. You have to go downstairs and go up again. And then there's 2 studio skylight windows, and there's a funny dormer on one of those buildings that looks at the street. So we propose to remove all of that to flatten the roof and to put a new extension in the middle of the floor. It's worth noting that the building on the left of us, which is to the east, is a floor higher than we are. And on the right side, the neighbors have a rooftop addition, which we would be up against. So we're kind of tucking in between two existing conditions which are taller than we are. So this is the existing and proposed elevation, existing on the left. Again, obviously with the proposed elevation, the rooftop addition, which is significantly back, is only minimally visible from, it's not visible from in front of the building, but we'll talk about that. So here's a view showing the visibility on the side of our addition facing to the west. So the darker gray hatching is the outline of the neighbor's bulkhead, which we're up against. And the only part of our house that's really towards the left side of the page is the street. And you can see that our chimney, which we're extending up, is going to be, bigger than the neighbor on that side. But in general, we're up against the neighbor. On the east side of the building, it's no change. We're butting up against the building that's a full story taller. Here are views of the existing studio skylight. This is the northernmost of them, which faces over the street. There's a funny copper bay window on this skylight, which we proposed with me. And here are the south studio skylight. These views were taken from in the middle of our roof. You can't see the skylight from any place in the public, but this is what's there. And we have some views of the mock-up. And we have more views of the mock-up. So here we're standing in front of the building, and what you're looking at is the mock-up is in place, and you cannot see the rooftop extension. You can see in the middle image and the right image a little bit of the front extended chimney on the right side of our house, peeking up over the roof. But you can't see the addition. If you move down the block, there's a small park on the corner of Bleecker Street and West 11th Street. And from two positions, from our view 4 and our view 5, you can see a little bit of our rooftop addition. So in view 4, I think you're seeing the chimney is poking up a bit over our cornice line. In view 5, you're seeing a bit of our chimney and you're seeing a little bit of the front edge of our roof. But this is, obviously in the winter when the leaves are off. When the leaves are on, you will not be able to see this at all. Then in view 6, you already can't see it. So what you're looking at there is the taller buildings beyond us. So it's a fairly narrow cone of view where you're going to get a little slice of this thing. Here what you're seeing is from Bleecker Street, these are zoomed in views. On the left side is an actual picture of the mock-up. So you're seeing a little bit of orange, which is our chimney that's popping up there, and a little bit of the front edge of the building. On the right is a photo montage of the same thing. So our proposed addition is intended to be a light colored stucco, and it was chosen to be as discreet against the sky plane as possible. So as you can see, it's pretty hard to even render this edge. You can see what's going on. Here's just a sightline diagram showing a section of the proposed addition. And that's the roof portion. So now we're going to look at the back facade. So here we have views of the existing conditions. The middle is our house. The right is, just for context, it's not part of our road, but it's an existing townhouse. The rear facades do not align, and they're a story taller than the rear. On the left is the house. It's the pair of ours. This back facade was replaced as part of the 2012 project. So here's a drawing of the existing conditions and the proposed conditions. So the reason that we are presenting the back facade to is we're proposing to replace the facade. We want to rebuild it with historically appropriate brick, with the windows in a regular pattern. If you go back, you can see that the windows have been altered from their original regular pattern, and the brickwork is a bit of a patchwork. So we'll have some more pictures coming out in a minute. We propose to recreate the historic cornice, build the facade back in the same plane, and with historically appropriate brick. So here's just a montage showing that the facade rendered with its materials. And here are photographs of the existing conditions. So the existing rear facade is painted red. Actually, each individual brick is painted. And I presume that's because they moved a lot of windows around. And it's kind of a patchwork. So none of the windows align vertically, and they also don't array themselves symmetrically across the building. Then there's, on the right side, there's this little structure that has kind of a tower and a balcony overlooking the backyard, and it interrupts the line of the cornice. So we want to remove that and put a continuous cornice to match the existing cornice back. Here just are these proposed windows. And then there's one other element to the rear of the building, which is for the cellar, we propose to create a light well. That would be approximately 17 feet wide and 7 feet deep. This would be at the cellar level, and there would be a skylight, a walkable glass skylight, flush with the garden. So there's nothing above grade to see here, but there's an excavation portion of this. It doesn't touch the neighboring buildings. It wouldn't require underpinning the neighboring buildings, but it is excavation. So here's a section diagram showing the existing on the left, the proposed condition on the right. And you can see that we're proposing to lower the cellar floor approximately 3 feet via benching, not underpinning. And we are proposing to create a light well in the rear yard that's about 7 feet deep. We further have some precedents if you want us to look at this. This is the house next door, which was approved in 2012. And I can go on through the remaining precedents, but I'll leave that up to you. It's helpful to you.
Precedents of buildings that have had their stoops removed and
Yes.
approvals to recreate
Yeah, so
stoops.
this is, so obviously the neighboring house is the main precedent because we're copying for the, so many of our details are the same. But also there's 78, which is a building that had really its whole facade kind of removed except for the cornice. And the commission approved putting the stoop back. This is right around the corner. There's 73 Perry Street where the commission approved removing an oriel window at the front floor and reinstalling an Italianate style front door. And this building is also here, similar to ours. So I think what's interesting about this precedent is that there was an architecturally, well, there was a feature of interest, and it was removed in service of putting the buildings back to their original natural condition. And then there's also right across the street from us, there's 269 West 11th Street, which also lost its stoop. Also was recently restored, and this project just finished construction this year.
Okay.
And then there's a
All right, great. Thank you. Do we have any questions, commissioners? Commissioner Chu?
A question about the basement, or I guess it's a cellar. When you said that you're doing 3 more feet down below.
Yes.
And you're stepping in from the sides as well as the back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
All right, and Commissioner Ginsburg?
So is the reinstalling the stoop and the other changes on the front facade required for what's happening inside, or just something that is desired, if you understand the
Yeah, no,
difference?
absolutely. That's a great point. I mean, that's actually the motivation for the project in many ways. So the building currently is a 5-family house. Let me just go all the way back to the front side. So when the house lost its stoop, they created a new entrance vestibule on the street level, and they moved the door down. But that entrance vestibule actually does not align to any of the floors on the inside of the building. So it's higher than the basement floor, and it's also the ceiling of it is higher than the floor of the product. So the product floor is not flat; it has to pop up over that interior space that's created, kind of a midpoint, it's like a split level. So what we want to do is, as part of restoring the house to single-family uses, we want to restore the product floor and restore the entrance to the product, which necessitated putting back the stoop. And then that really kind of began this whole process of excavation, restoring the facade of the house.
Thank you.
And it is now, it will be a single family home?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, other questions? All right, we'll take testimony and we'll come back to you. And noting that there is no one in the room to speak on this item, I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. There are a few hands raised in the attendees list. The first we'll be hearing from is John Graham from the Victorian Society of New York. John Graham, I'm John Graham, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Well, I guess it's actually, yeah, it is afternoon, commissioners, for the Victorian Society in New York. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. For the last century, 276 West 11th Street has retained its landmark neo-federal appearance. While it was not originally designed with this facade, its current appearance, complete with artist studio skylight, is vital to the history of not only the building, but also the street and the Greenwich Village Historic District. Personal preference of the applicant aside, the neo-federal appearance of this 5-unit townhouse can be maintained while converting it into a single-family home. Additionally, the proposed new facade is not based on any evidence of the townhouse's original appearance. What is being proposed is nothing short of a speculative fabrication masquerading as a historic restoration. The house next door, serving as a model for this one, was also a speculative reconstruction. The designation report states that while these houses are similar, they were actually built a year apart for different owners. Removal of the front-facing and visible artist studio window and charmingly picturesque copper dormer would eliminate features associated with the early 20th century legacy of the neighborhood as a haven for creative persons and artists. The removal of the rear-facing studio window and little top-floor balcony is equally inappropriate. The replacement, a clunky and all too visible rooftop addition, is not an appropriate substitute. This proposal violates 2 of the foundational tenets of historic preservation. 1, that significant historic alterations should be preserved, and 2, that restoration should be faithfully executed based on documentation. It would be a betrayal to the history of this house and to the neighborhood if the plans for this proposal were approved. We do not support it. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Andrew Dolkart. Andrew Dolkart, I am promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrew Dolkart. I'm an architectural historian and professor of historic preservation at Columbia University. I'm also the author of the award-winning book, The Row House Reborn, which chronicles the alteration of row houses in the early decades of the 20th century and examines how this changed the character of New York's neighborhoods. The longest chapter in the book focuses on Greenwich Village, what I call the real estate of Bohemia. I regret that in only 3 minutes, I do not have time to provide greater detail on this significant movement in New York City's architectural and social history. I would like to strongly oppose the proposed alteration to 276 West 11th Street. I am shocked that this is even being proposed in 2024, exactly 100 years after the current facade was created. 276 is an 1852 row house that was altered in the colonial revival style. This alteration was part of a significant design trend in Greenwich Village in the years after World War I, as rundown row houses were transformed into new housing, often with studio apartments. Stoops were often removed, creating basement entrances, and other facade improvements were made. Especially popular in Greenwich Village was the addition of artist studio windows on the roof, as seen in this building. 276 is an especially elaborate facade redesign. The entry focuses on a well-proportioned federal-style fanlight that's flanked by fluted Doric pilasters that support a balcony with iron railings. This is a very handsome colonial revival ensemble. The facade is then enlivened with arched windows, splayed lintels, and multi-pane sash. This is a facade that should be valued, not wastefully destroyed. I would argue that the job of the Landmarks Preservation Commission is to preserve an authentic 100-year-old colonial revival facade rather than permit the creation of a faux 1850s facade. I hope that you will unanimously reject this inappropriate proposal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I am promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC is sad to see that the applicants have taken a historicist approach to restoring 276 West 11th Street's facade. We find choosing such an early stylistic antecedent to be inappropriate here. The current facade, especially the copper dormer and studio window, is reflective of the sort of alterations made to Greenwich Village row houses in the 1920s. Those alterations communicate an entire period of the neighborhood's history and have become significant in their own right. Transforming this building into a twin of its neighbor at 278 erases that entire period of history and in the process eliminates 276's idiosyncratic details which add personality to the streetscape. We find the proposed rooftop addition completely inappropriate as an individual element. Taken together, we find the entire proposal inappropriate and ask the Commission to require the applicants to develop a scheme that respects, restores, and incorporates the building's 1920s redesign into its latest iteration. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the front facade restoration, including window modifications and historic double door, approval of the recreation of the stoop, and requests that the choice of ironwork be reconsidered, noting that the building status as a twin does not obligate replication of the ironwork at 278, particularly when there are many more attractive and historically accurate options to choose from in the district. Conditional approval of the rooftop addition contingent upon the applicant being able to demonstrate to the Commission via photographic evidence that the rooftop addition meets the standard of minimal visibility from a public thoroughfare. Approval of the rear facade reconstruction and redesign, including metal deck and staircase, noting that the choice of brick and style of mortar joints need to be in kind with that which is being replaced. And approval of the rear yard excavation, provided that all applicable regulations are followed and that care is taken to ensure the integrity of the subject property and the neighboring houses. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. So would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
Hi, do I need to state my name again? Yeah. Okay. So to briefly respond to the comments, appreciate their views, but of course we disagree. I think it's important to just note for the Commission that we studied a number of design alternatives when we were developing this proposal, which some of them attempted to preserve elements of the 1920s alteration. And the motivation behind this project is not that we don't like the 1920s facade, it's that the removal of the stoop, oh, how do I want to put this? I'm sorry. When you put the stoop back on this building, you would be, and if you were to leave the 1920s facade in place, you'd be creating a third condition which never existed in history. And so rather than sort of approach this as a hodgepodge of different historical elements from different periods of time, we felt the only responsible thing to do was to return it to a state that we did know that existed, which the Commission approved on the neighboring building, which incorporates the elements of being a single family house. You know, this was a period of this building's history when it was an apartment building, and it's no longer going to be an apartment building. So we feel that the stoop is a very important part of this building's use as a single family house, and putting the stoop back while retaining elements of the 1924 alteration would be inappropriate. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Commissioners, any final questions? Yes, Commissioner Chu.
Just for discussion amongst commissioners, I'm just curious about our previous interpretations of these types of alterations, because it's referring to an original state that was prior to the landmark status of this facade. I also just wanted to know if we know the date of the addition of the studio rooftop piece.
Okay, and I think the applicant can confirm the date of the studio window, but I suspect that it also went in the 1924 alteration, right, or thereabouts. And so with respect to the commission's history here, the commission has, both in the designation and in its regulatory past, recognized the early 1900 or the early 20th century to be a significant layer of history in this particular historic district, as in some other districts as well, but particularly in this historic district. And many of the changes that were undertaken in the 1920s included changes that converted some of these buildings into multiple dwellings and also converted spaces for artists. And so that's where the studio windows came up. And also, so what were typical changes at the front facades were sometimes stoops were removed and the facades were stripped. Sometimes stoops were removed and the facades were stripped, and maybe there was a simple door surround at the basement entry. Sometimes a new feature would be put in where the former parlor door was, or a window that matched the others, or in one example, they showed there was an oriole window added at that location. And then sometimes they were redesigned entirely, either using a classical language or Mediterranean revival language, or one of the other sort of revival styles that was popular at the period. And so these are changes that we have always considered very carefully. And as the applicant pointed out in the examples, we have approved removal of that layer to restore a building back to its 19th century appearance when the building has been sort of stripped and there's one feature, but where the facade has sort of been redesigned in that layer and all of the components work together. We have been, I think, a little more careful about that question about whether it's appropriate to erase that layer or go back to the 19th century.
Case by case, there's not one.
Yeah.
Which period of history do we respect and protect?
Yeah.
And this is also a district. It is not designated. So
It's a historic district. Corey, is there anything that you'd like to add to what I said? Or
No, I think you covered it well. I mean, but I'll just also offer that there have on occasions been sort of hybrid approaches where the commission has asked to keep some aspects of the early 20th century alterations while still allowing some restorative aspects, just as some of those buildings, as you pointed out, were kind of done in that way to begin with in the 20th century. They may have kept the historic cornice, but changed many other aspects as done in this building.
yeah, and that is as sort of because of these layers in this historic district, you do find a lot of row house facades with mixed styles and hybrid style, intermingled style elements. Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
Yeah, I have a question for the applicant. Is the existing window where the stoop would go wide enough to put a door in it if you put back a stoop?
I suppose you could put a single leaf door into that window. Yeah, it would be narrow, but it would be a door.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? And I think, when we, just to sort of further the thought, when we think about if the facade was fully redesigned in the early 20th century, and we think about the question of the value of restoring it versus maintaining it, we've looked at sort of the quality of what was done in the 1920s or in the early 20th century and how that compares to what's proposed. That's it. There's the sort of the style and design and then the quality and execution of it that can be considered in evaluating that. So this is I think we need to close the hearing though before we begin our discussion. So Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So this is going to be a really interesting discussion. And I think I've sort of given the history of this district and our regulatory past as it relates to that history. So I won't repeat that, but there is the front facade to look at. There are the rooftop elements that are being proposed to be replaced with a simplified rooftop addition. And then there is the new rear facade and that small amount of excavation beneath it to be considered. So areas both at the front, back, and at the roof. Vice Chair Bland?
I just knew. It's heading my way. This is a very interesting dilemma, I think. And it was all brought forth very eloquently by the presentation, by the testimony, which was mostly against the presentation and the application, and then the rebuttal by the presenter, which parallel my own thinking. Well, what if we didn't allow a new stoop to be put back? That would be breaking some ground. I mean, we're so proud of ourselves for allowing, and proud of New York owners of putting back stoops. But if you put back a stoop here, you would create, as the applicant has said, a condition which has never existed if you kept the rest of the facade intact, the early 20th century revisions. So it really is a dilemma here. And of course, we have a long history of around this table and frankly of a presentation, of historic preservation theology, one might say, of acknowledging the layering of history, which certainly I support, and I think most of us around this table and around this country think of that as an important aspect of how we view preservation these days. So it's a real dilemma, and I'm not sure exactly how I'm coming down on it. I'm sort of talking my way out of it or into it. It's a real dilemma in this case. I mean, I don't think it's been such a dilemma for me in the past. So this is bringing up a lot of issues. One could say, as Andrew Dolcott did say, it's a handsome condition now. It's not it's not an abortion, not a messed up thing at all right now. It's an intact style, an amalgam of styles. So what's wrong with leaving pretty much everything we see? Well, the owner, who obviously would like to has envy of what his neighbor has done, I think, and would like to follow that as a rule. I'm really a little bit on the fence. I can, but let me say the easy part. I think the back is really pretty okay. I didn't see anything that was really jarring me at that point. And much of what the owner wants to do could be achieved by leaving the front more or less intact, except for the issue of the stoop and the accommodating issues related to that on the interior, which are not insignificant. Can I punt, having just sort of
Sure. But,
laid it up a little bit and hear what other people
and it may
say?
be hard to talk about this independent of the facade, but do you have any thoughts on the rooftop addition?
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the roof as well.
Yeah.
I think that the front of the roof, on one hand could be left more or less as it is,
Got it.
with all of the back and all the other kind of garbagey stuff that's been put on the roof in a very confusing way, eliminated, and more or less what the applicant has suggested could be behind that. So I don't think I've ever punted quite like this, but I really would like to hear my colleagues as well. I've tried to tee it up in a way that,
Yeah, you did, you teed it up.
is that all right?
We're gonna work through it around the table.
Now I think I have to go. I mean,
All right, Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, I do agree that this is a difficult one. Because I don't know about the caliber of the work that was done, but the look and feel of the facade is actually the original, the newer facade is quite attractive. However, I am incredibly sympathetic to the desire to, put a stoop there with a more formal entrance as this becomes a one-family house. It's a new it's a new time and a new use. I mean, the original use was probably as a one family, and then it was more appropriate over time, for whatever reason, to change it into rentals. And so the stoop was taken out, but now they want the stoop back. So could they put an elegant stoop back in this facade that, you know, with the beautiful door and keep and make this look lovely and have and keep this sort of eclectic look on the block? I think that you could. And if everybody thinks that, then I would go along with it. That said, I am also very sympathetic about what you're trying to accomplish, and I think you've done a great job. And I don't really, with your new design, it's very clean, it's very attractive. I don't think it's a problem that it emulates the building next door, because if you go down into, you know, brownstone and historic districts, there are buildings that look exactly the same in a row all the time. You know, this, when done, could look like it's been here forever. And in fact, it was here at one time. So I'm very sympathetic to that as well. I do like the idea, just as a nod to some of the, you know, some of what was here before, of keeping the studio window and the top. That could be like actually the perfect compromise, potentially. And I think the back looks is definitely approvable.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Okay, Troy. I realize, yeah, that this is a challenge. I do respect the approach for bringing this townhouse back to maybe its original use and processional entry. And I can understand the desire to bring the stoop back. I think aesthetically, my biggest concern is the loss of the arched lower parlor window tops, because it does add a unique character to this facade. Also, the unique headers over the windows with the keystone. When I look at this as a historic district, it does have a place in the blend of diversity, all historic. And so I feel hesitant to approve a complete re-envisioning of this facade. That being said, I don't have an issue with bringing a stoop back. I do wonder whether or not the applicant could work with the style of the lower parlor level and do a stoop that might be somewhere more sympathetic to the lower level. There are precedences for such entries. And because this is a new, we're not trying to say it was the original, it is yet another layer, but it does respect the 20s and what happened there. I feel that the stoop is the biggest issue for me. The rooftop, I may be a little more lenient because it does seem to have a cobbled effect onto the house below. The rear, the patchy paint. My house has the same awful thing, painted brick. I can't understand. Yeah. That'll be a huge improvement.
Okay, great. Did you want to add something? Or you?
Well, no,
Okay.
I'm just saying that I'm settling.
You're settling in. Okay, we'll keep going.
Very helpful.
Commissioner Master?
Yeah, I understand that this is a really difficult decision, and there's probably no really good solution, no really clear-cut solution. However, I think I can find this appropriate. And the reason is that we are moving from a 5-family back to a single family and putting back a stoop that was originally there when it was a 1-family. So to me, that makes sense. And I understand the architect's rationale that once you go back and restore the stoop, that you would want to be cohesive in the style and return back to the 1850s. The other thing that I find compelling is that they are matching the townhouse next door, which we have already approved. And so it will have a cohesive look, and it's something that we have done in the past, so that makes sense to me. And I also think it was very well thought out. They came up with lots of examples, and even with the ironwork, they were responsive to the community board's suggestions of trying to stay within a time frame. In terms of the rooftop addition, I don't think it's visible from the front, so I'm okay with it. I liked Commissioner Lutfi's suggestion of potentially exploring the addition of the dormer in the studio window, but even without that, I can still find it appropriate. And I think that the rear facade, given that there's no public visibility, I think it's fine.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I'm fine with the rear. I started out feeling somewhat schizophrenic on this because I was focused on the artist studio and the dormer and thinking how they really are a feature of the village that you see all over, and it was kind of, didn't want to lose that. And then I started looking at the whole picture more thoroughly, thinking about, because as Fred said, we often replace stoops and so forth, and it's a big plus from our point of view. But I also started looking at the whole thing and thinking, this is a 1924 design. It's a little eclectic, and actually that kind of adds to my feeling to want to preserve it, because it's something that's been sitting there, the whole ensemble, in effect, as far as I understand, has been this way since 1924. It's 100 years, and it's really become part of that streetscape I'm somebody who doesn't always feel we need to preserve something just because it's a layer. This seems to me a rather significant layer in the sense that the whole ensemble of the facade and the dormer and artist studio have been there, and were very purposefully designed in a kind of a distinctive way, which is a little atypical, but that kind of adds to its charm for me. So I had gotten myself, worked up to this feeling like I was going to be the only one who was wanting to actually preserve this as it is. I don't have any problem with an addition on the top, and as I said, with the back. But I kind of hate to lose what's happened here and has been preserved and become part of this streetscape for so long. So, I'm in favor of keeping the facade without changing the stoop, and also the upper, roof, accretions.
All right, Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. I think that you, Sarah, teed it up correctly in my experience of my time here, that a lot of the decision about whether to permit a removal of accretion hinges on its quality. And I think that looking at the quality of the woodwork, quality of the balcony, scrolls, and the arch windows, it's a good job. They didn't do a bad job. I think that, I feel the urge to restore it, or not restore it, to recreate it as a Victorian consistent product, because it's aesthetically appealing. It feels good. I like the way that feels. But I think that this isn't Park Slope. It's a place where difference in the visibility of those layers is critical to the understanding of the district as being a place of its own, a place that in the 20s had a real rebirth. And this building, in a funny way, has all the elements all the elements of that rebirth. It has the more formal design style change of the 1920s and its reversion to a more classical language. And it also has its self-made, hacky, kind of junky artists on a shoestring accretions on the roof. You know, that the little dormer and the north light. So I think that those should be preserved. I think you could take off the back of the north light and the back of the dormer and put your nice little room up there. I don't think that you know, this precludes modifying the majority of the roof. I also feel, though, that the back tower is important to preserve for the same reasons. It's incredibly unusual. I've never seen one here of that nature. It's very unusual. I don't think you need to preserve the other stuff on the roof or the other stuff on the rear facade, but I think that tower is it's kind of in the same category as bay windows and other features that we see on rear facades, where we take the exception to the more liberal approach and try to hold up to it. So I think that this building kind of speaks to Greenwich Village as a unique place with a special history, and I think we should hold on to it.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
So to add to our confusion, let me go around. First of all, to say I have a bias, which I'm saying because it isn't part of the discussion, is it's too bad that 5 units is becoming 1 unit and when we need housing. But I realize that isn't our purview. So I would say in the front, and also you may not have been here, we had a previous discussion about how rebuilding things sort of creates a Disneyfication. I would like to keep as much of the front facade as possible. However, I would be open to adding a stoop because I realize from a functional perspective that could be important. I think we should keep the dormer and the skylight windows on the addition. The whole middle part, you can do the plan you want to do. I would also, as Commissioner Goldblum said, keep what I'll call as the tower on the back. But besides that, everything else, including walkable skylight, et cetera, on the rear is fine. So I think what I'm saying is I'd like to see as little as possible done while upgrading it, changing it to meet the different needs.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, this has been a very interesting discussion. It reminds me of another building on the Bowery of, the building has been renovated 3 times. And if you want to go back to the future or to the past, which version do you go back to? Right. So I understand. I think Vice Chair Bland started this discussion. And so the way I'm leaning is obviously that Greenwich Village is a very historic area, and it has its own unique characters. And I think I'm leaning toward Commissioner Ginsburg's suggestion of, preserving as much as possible, but to the degree that if the applicant still wants to add back a stoop, which they can apply for, the question is, what does it look like? And I think that's, yeah, right.
Okay. Yes, and Vice Chair Bland, we're going to go back to you.
Boy, nothing like getting a second shot. But this was so helpful, and it clarified my own thinking a little bit more too. I think I'm in the position that pretty much Mark has just said, that I find it hard not to allow a homeowner who, yes, I'm also the 5-to-1 is sad for the overall problem of our city, but that's not our purview. But taking a multifamily and making it into a single family house, hard for me to tell a homeowner who is going to spend a lot of money doing all this that he can't or she can't put a stoop up. So in the hands of a very talented group of architects here, I think I would love to see an attempt to make a stoop, but leave the most of the rest of what we see on the facade intact, including the rooftop elements. Behind what happens on the roof, have fun, but I think we have to see that. And I think if I recall, it's in pretty bad shape. So I think it's going to have to be rebuilt or certainly majorly repaired. But I would just like to see if a stoop could be added. Initially, I said, and it's been said in the testimony or by the applicant, I think, in his rebuttal, that would add a new level of change. But yet, is that so wrong? Is that a bad thing to do? I mean, it was a new level of change in the 20s that didn't reincorporate everything. So it was already a mixed bag. It'll be a further mix if we can achieve a stoop with the rest of the facade more or less left as it is. So that's where I'm falling out.
Okay, great. Thank you all for your thoughtful comments. And I think, we've heard sort of a range, right? Sort of some support for the proposal and then some support or, sort of non-support for changing it at all. And then somewhere in between, which is trying to accommodate a stoop within the existing design and which would result in sort of a hybrid, as you pointed out. But as we've also had it through this discussion heard, that really this district does have the eclectic character because of the sort of hybridization over the various layers, particularly the 19th and early 20th century layers. So that may be an appropriate solution, but we'll have to see it to know. I think that that would go along with keeping the front rooftop accretions, but doing your rooftop behind it. And then at the rear, we had a lot of support for the rear, but a couple of suggestions to keep the tower. So that's something you may want to think about as you incorporate and synthesize our comments and think about a revised proposal. So we'll take no action today and we'll have you work on a revision and come back to us when you're ready. All right, thank you. Okay. So it's 12:45. We're going to break for lunch now, and we will be back at 1:15. So we'll ask all members of the public who are on the Zoom to voluntarily exit the meeting at this time so that should you wish to return, you don't experience any technical difficulties that might occur if we have to remove you.